Chapter 2209. What I said must have some basis. Chu Yang said, the final decision is still in the hands of your clan. If you insist on moving, I can't do anything about it. But I won't buy it. But after you sell it to someone else, I will buy it from someone else. I don't want to destroy the feng shui lifeline of your clan. But if you really sell it, I won't watch the good feng shui fall into someone else's hands. I will buy it back. If I do that, I may have to spend a lot of money. But that money will buy my own peace of mind. Because all of this has nothing to do with me. Of course, I still have to seriously advise you not to sell it. Chu Yang's words had already hit the nail on the head. In fact, they were even very explicit. Tang Clan's third young master pondered and said, this is no small matter. I will go back and discuss it with the clan elders. Chu Yang nodded, that's right. If you choose not to move, I can help you if you don't have enough money to build the Tang Clan's courtyard. Tang Clan's third young master's eyes lit up. Thank you, Brother Chu. He didn't wait for the meal to finish. He waved his hand and called the waiter to settle the bill. Then, he couldn't wait to go home. It seemed that Chu Yang's words had touched him a lot. I say, senior brother, you aren't making fun of Tang Clan's third young master, right? Tan Tan stared at Chu Yang with eyes full of suspicion. It seemed that Chu Yang rarely did such a righteous thing. He didn't have any tricks up his sleeves, right? Get lost. A certain king of hell who was being unreasonably suspected shouted angrily, go eat your sweet buns. The words sweet buns were like a trump card. Tan Tan was stunned in an instant. On Chu Yang's side, he was still racing against time to intensify his training. Under such an atmosphere, Heavenly Armament Pavilion naturally grew stronger and stronger day by day. Such strength was difficult to conceal. The tyrannical strength of Heavenly Armament Pavilion was not unknown just because it had risen for a short period of time. On the contrary, its name was expanding day by day. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. However, other places were not as calm as here. For example, Mo Yuntian's entire world had turned into a lump of porridge, and it was the kind of porridge that was boiling. Yu Lai was heavily injured and could no longer bear it. The journey back home could not be bumpy. The entire journey took a full month before they returned to their hometown, Mo Yuntian. Mo Yun's vice commander, Yu, had returned in defeat. The shocking news of Meng Wu Ya betraying Mo Yuntian was like a bolt from the blue, shocking all the upper echelons of Mo Yuntian in a short time. Both the military and the government felt an unprecedented shock. The first reaction of all the higher-ups after receiving this news was disbelief. These two pieces of news were simply too absurd. At the time of the initial intelligence, Chu Yang was at best a small fry who had just ascended to the level of saint. How could he possibly defeat and even severely injure Yu Kai who had already reached the level of saint? Also, he wanted Meng Wu Ya, who was also a saint, to surrender to him. Was this nonsense? However, the truth of the matter proved the veracity of these lies. As a result, the upper echelons were even more shocked. Especially the first point, it was truly a great shock. All the upper echelons of Mo Yuntian clearly realized the strength of this enemy, Chu Yang, or perhaps, Chu Yang could no longer be described with the word strong. What kind of existence was Chu Yang to be able to make such a strong army like Yu Lai suffer heavy losses and return in defeat? Even to the extent of causing Yu Lai to be heavily injured and on the verge of death. The second point was because of Meng Wu Ya's betrayal. Almost all the discerning people recognized one thing: the rift between the two opposing factions in Mo Yuntian's military had finally turned into a chasm, moving from the dark to the surface, tearing off the last bit of concealment. The conflict between the two opposing factions in Mo Yuntian's military had finally reached the point of turning into a bare blade. This rupture was no longer avoidable. On one side was the eternal protector of Mo Yuntian, Marshal Mu Tianlan, the invincible military god of Mo Yuntian. On the other side was the trusted aide of Mo Yuntian, Vice Commander Yu Lai. Even before Yu Lai returned, the military generals between the two sides had already fallen into a state of mutual hostility, on the verge of fighting at any time. Everyone was watching this cautiously, and no one was willing to say a word. However, The scouts of the various major forces had already flown into the sky at the first moment. Mo Yuntian, immediately sent out imperial guards to carry Yu Lai into the palace, inquiring about the reason for this trip in detail. It was precisely because of this matter that even Marshal Mu's request for an audience was ignored. Yu Kai's disheveled appearance and emotional outbursts caused Yuan Tianji to fly into a rage. Marshal Mu, who was waiting outside the palace, heard the Sky Emperor's angry roar filled with hatred. Marshal Mu's thoughts moved, and a wisp of his soul immediately left the palace and returned to the military camp. Immediately control all the chaos in the Dream Slayer army, then transfer Meng Wu Ya and the others' families immediately. It's extremely urgent. Quickly. Marshal Mu's soul only said this one sentence, then returned to the outside of the palace again, continuing to wait for Yuan Tianji's summons. This entire process only took the blink of an eye. As soon as the news of Meng Wuya's betrayal spread, Commander Mu had already sent people to protect Meng Wuya and the family members of his trusted subordinates. However, now that the evidence was irrefutable, the original protection force was no longer enough. Marshal Mu once again made a new response at the first moment. Almost at the same time when Marshal Mu's soul returned, he heard an angry roar in the palace. Mu Tianlan, what the hell are you doing? Come in. It was Mo Yuntian's resentful voice. Mu Tianlan sighed in his heart. Under normal circumstances, the Sky Emperor would never call his name directly. However, once he did, it meant that the Sky Emperor was on the verge of exploding. Mu Tianlan walked in slowly, only to see Yu Lai half lying on a chair at this moment. Her face had regained its color, and her spirit was also vigorous. It was obvious that she was fine. After receiving the divine medicine from Mo Yuntian, Yu Lai recovered very quickly. Lord Sky Emperor, Mu Tianlan greets you. Marshal Mu bowed slightly. Look at the good soldiers you brought. Yuan Tianji glared at Marshal Mu with a sinister expression. He was furious. Disregarding the grace of the emperor, colluding with the enemy, ignoring the blood feud, ignoring my orders, turning a deaf ear to them. You actually betrayed us at the last minute and killed your fellow soldiers, causing tens of thousands of soldiers to be buried in a foreign land. Ignoring the blood feud, as Yuan Tianlan spoke, the anger in his eyes became more and more intense. It had turned into the darkest flames, as if it was going to burn everything. Lord Sky Emperor. Mu Tianlan took a deep breath and said loudly, how can this matter be concluded like this? From the beginning to the end, it was only Yu Lai's side of the story. How can you convict her? Meng Wuya had always been loyal to the Ink Cloud Heavenly Court. He had been at their beck and call for hundreds of thousands of years, and he had never changed his mind even in death. How could he lose his integrity in his old age when he was in a high position? Isn't this strange? Yu Lai on the side interjected, Marshal Mu's words are wrong and biased. If he didn't betray someone when he has a high position and power, what's the value of betraying when he's just a small soldier? Mu Tianlan was furious. Yu Lai, are you implying that every high-ranking official of the Heavenly Court may betray their homeland and defect to the enemy at the last minute? Yu Lai didn't show any weakness. She said in a deep voice, what I said, Marshal Mu should understand. Why are you beating around the bush? For a time, the two argued endlessly, and no one could suppress the other. You two, stop arguing. Yuan Tianjie shouted in a deep voice. First of all, when Meng Wuya first met Chu Yang was only a martial saint. Meng Wuya did not immediately take him down, leaving him room to develop. This is a great sin. Even with the power of a thunderbolt, he still couldn't destroy an ant. If there's nothing strange about it, Mu Tianlan, do you think it's possible? Secondly, Meng Wu Ya has always prided himself as a clear stream, and he has a lot to say about what he did. Now, it's not impossible for him to neglect his duty, be benevolent and sympathetic to the enemy, and even cover up for the enemy. This is the second. Thirdly, Yu Lai led the 80,000 Moyun army to descend at lightning speed, and before that, I didn't hesitate to mobilize heaven and reached an agreement with the Demon Empress. In the end, I still returned in defeat. As a heavenly emperor, the Demon Empress will not lie to me, and disdain to lie to me. Then, Chu Yang and the others can't really get the official help of the Demon Emperor Heaven in Demon Emperor Heaven. Since there's no external help, he's isolated and helpless. Then, he can still inflict heavy losses to the army, almost to the point of being completely wiped out. Then, other than Meng Wu Ya, who's familiar with my army, acting as a spy, or even betraying at the last minute, what other possibility is there? Mu Tianlan hurriedly said, although what your majesty said is reasonable, this is still within the scope of speculation. There's no evidence. How can you convince everyone? Mu Tianlan, you're so bold. Yu Lai said coldly, General Mu, I've always respected your outstanding ability, and you're the #1 pillar of my Moyun Heaven's army. Everything in the army is handled by you in an orderly manner. Some things, even Lord Heavenly Emperor relies heavily on you. Even your cultivation is not much inferior to Lord Heavenly Emperor. But how can you speak to Lord Heavenly Emperor like this? Are you criticizing Lord Heavenly Emperor, or are you teaching Lord Heavenly Emperor how to do things? Are all these actions of yours the duty of a subject? Mu Tianlan flew into a rage. Yu Lai, what do you mean by this? Over there, Heavenly Emperor Moyun's expression was already somewhat ugly. Yu Lai's words were full of flattery on the surface, but in reality, it was full of ambushes and traps. His words were all accusing Mu Tianlan of having a disloyal heart, and his intentions could be said to be extremely vicious. Chapter 22:10. The Lord of a Heaven, especially in a world like Heaven Imperial Court where the bigger fist was the bigger reason, no matter how magnanimous and broad-minded he was most afraid of his subjects having the ability to replace him. Even if the subjects didn't have to have this intention, as long as they had this ability, they had already committed suicide. Everything is under your control. This was equivalent to saying that Mu Tianlan could cover the sky with one hand and act arbitrarily. Lord Heavenly Emperor also relies heavily on you. This was obviously saying that Mu Tianlan's achievements were so great that even Lord Heavenly Emperor couldn't leave you. As for your cultivation, it's not inferior to Lord Heavenly Emperor. This was the most vicious curse. Mu Tianlan, you completely have the ability to usurp the throne. No matter which emperor heard these words, they wouldn't be indifferent. Not to mention that Yuan Tianji was already very dissatisfied with Mu Tianlan because of Yuan Shuntu and Meng Wuya. At this moment, when he heard these words that added fuel to the fire, the anger in his heart only grew stronger. Right and wrong are already clear. There's no need to argue anymore. Yuan Tianji said coldly, General Mu. Although Mu Tianlan had a belly full of anger, Yuan Tianji's position was clear now. It was useless to argue anymore. He could only bow and accept the order. Lord Heavenly Emperor, please give your orders. I think that the Dream Army led by Meng Wuya no longer needs to exist. It can be cancelled. Yuan Tianji said lightly. Your Majesty, this can't be done. Mu Tianlan turned pale with fright. Under Meng Wuya's careful management, the Dream Army was united from top to bottom. It could be said that it was one of the few elite troops in Moyanshan's army. And the number was quite large. The entire army had a total of 500,000 people. This was a powerful force that no person or force could ignore. How could they just cancel it like that? Although Mu Tianlan knew that he would offend Yuan Tianji even more if he continued to argue, this matter was important. He still tried his best to persuade him. However, Yuan Tianji said with a cynical face, even the general has betrayed us. Do we still need to keep this army? Do we have to wait until the day when the traitor Meng Wuya returns and the entire army goes over to surrender? Your Majesty is wise. You have penetrating insight and hit the nail on the head. Yu Kai cheered loudly. Your Majesty, please think twice about this. Mu Tianlan's face twitched painfully. There's no need to say any more. Jin's decision has already been made. This is the final conclusion. Yuan Tianjie waved his hand and decisively decided on this matter. In addition, after the disbandment of the Dream Slayer army, all the soldiers and officers under the original organization will be strictly managed. Everyone must be included in the scope of inspection. Yuan Tianjie said coldly, once you find anything wrong, immediately kill them and eliminate all possibilities of hidden dangers. As for the empty space after the Dream Slayer army was disbanded, when he said the words Dream Slayer army, Yuan Tianji's face had an expression of disgust that was hard to hide. Yu Kai will take on the heavy responsibility of expanding the army. Marshal Mu had been doing everything by himself these days, no matter how big or small, and he was tired. Therefore, Marshal Mu did not need to worry about this matter anymore. Mu Tianlan heaved a long sigh in her heart. This matter had already been decided. His side had weakened a main force of the Dream Slayer army, while Yu Kai's side had added a new elite army of 500,000. His Majesty the Sky Emperor's true thoughts were already clear as day. Yu Kai accepted the order loudly and excitedly, expressing her loyalty. In addition, immediately give the order to capture Meng Wuya's family members in Ink Cloud Sky. Also, the family members of those who betrayed with Meng Wuya are also on the list of arrest. This group of people is not small. If they cooperate in rebellion, it may cause considerable losses, Yuan Tianjie said coldly, and a trace of completely unconcealed killing intent flashed past his eyes. Yu Kai frowned and said, Your Majesty, Meng Wuya betrayed heaven, and his crime is unforgivable. However, his family members and the families of the soldiers under him may not have the intention to rebel. Moreover, these people all have good cultivation. In the future, they may be of some use. Mu Tianlan glared at Yu Kai, so angry that her whole body trembled. This sentence seemed to be pleading on the surface, but in fact, it was reminding the Sky Emperor of Ink Cloud that they may not have the intention to rebel. Of course, they may also have the intention to rebel. Meng Wuya's family members were not ordinary people, and their cultivation was quite good. If they wanted to eliminate the root of the problem and eliminate the hidden danger, it would be better to be more resolute. Sure enough, the killing intent in Yuan Tianjie's eyes was even thicker. He said resolutely, the crime of rebellion is unforgivable. All the related personnel will be killed without mercy. Mu Tianlan only felt that his heart was hit by a 10,000-kilogram sledgehammer. Suddenly, there was a feeling of stars flying around. He struggled to open his mouth and said, Your Majesty. They don't know the inside story at all. They are all our Ink Cloud citizens. Your Majesty. Yuan Tianjie snorted, I've already made up my mind. There's no need to say more. Plop. Mu Tianlan knelt on the ground, touched the ground with his head, and said bitterly, Your Majesty, please take back your order. I'm willing to guarantee with my life that they have no intention to rebel. I ask Your Majesty to be lenient and show mercy. This was the first time Mu Tianlan knelt down since he knelt to Yuan Tianjie 300,000 years ago. Seeing this scene, Yuan Tianjie obviously hesitated for a moment. Your Majesty, I'm also willing to guarantee with my life that they have no intention to rebel. Marshal Mu's words are reasonable. Yu Kai struggled and said, If they really disregard Your Majesty's kindness in the future and rebel against this heaven, at that time, we will naturally put righteousness before family. We will definitely not be influenced by them and wallow in the mire. If they betrayed in the future, maybe Mu Tianlan would also rebel. This was the true meaning of Yu Kai's word. Mu Tianlan only felt that his blood was attacking his heart. He jumped up suddenly and slapped Yu Kai's face fiercely, shameless villain with a honeyed mouth and a sword in the belly. Adding insult to injury, you really have a dirty and vicious heart. With a pa sound, Yu Kai rolled down from the chair. He spat out blood and exclaimed, Mu Tianlan, you actually dare to commit murder in public in front of His Majesty. Mu Tianlan strode forward. His eyes were blood-red and murderous. Today, I will kill you, you despicable villain, and return Moyun Sky to a clear sky. However, a figure flashed in front of him. Yuan Tianjie stood in front of Mu Tianlan indifferently and said lightly, Marshal Mu, what are you going to do? At this moment, hearing this cold Marshal Mu was really like a basin of cold water poured over his head. Mu Tianlan suddenly felt weak all over. He staggered back a step and said, I am guilty. Yuan Tianjie narrowed his eyes and stared at him for a long time. Then he said, Since Marshal Mu and Marshal Yu vouch for this group of people at the same time, then I will spare them for the time being. However, they can be spared from death, but they can't escape punishment. Everyone will be thrown into the prison to see what happens next. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your grace. Mu Tianlan lowered his head sadly. Yuqi, you made a promise just now. Since you promised to place righteousness above family, Jin will order you to supervise the prison. You must capture all the traitors and bring them to justice. If anyone escapes, Jin will punish you for neglecting your duty. Yuan Tianji said coldly. Yes, Your Majesty. Yu Kai agreed loudly. Please rest assured, Your Majesty. I will definitely fulfill my duty and will not be influenced by anyone. I will not wrongly accuse a good person, nor will I let a traitor go. If there is a mistake, Your Majesty will punish me severely. Mu Tianlan suddenly closed his eyes. He only felt that his heart was cold. Every word of Yu Kai's was directed at him. Did he have no chance to intervene in this matter anymore? If the soldiers of the Dream Slayer army and their families really fell into Yu Kai's hands, how could they have a good ending? Mu Tianlan didn't believe that Meng Wuya would betray from the bottom of his heart. But now, Meng Wuya had become a traitor under Yu Kai's trap. This was already decided, and it was also decided by Yuan Tianjie. It was the same for everyone else. The prisoners who were caught and thrown into the prison were directly put under Yu Kai's control. Their ending was undoubtedly more miserable. Perhaps, His Majesty the Sky Emperor was warning him. Otherwise, Mo Yuntian had officials in charge of criminal law. Why would he use a deputy marshal of the world's armed forces to directly manage a small prison? Even if the prisoners inside were important, but there was no need for this, it could be imagined that after this matter, Yu Kai's authority would be astonishingly high, and he would gradually be alienated by His Majesty the Sky Emperor. His group of good brothers who followed him before would all suffer. And now, he could only give in. If he were to be enraged and take any action, then this group of people who treated him as their core would truly be faced with a calamity of annihilation. Mu Tianlan didn't even know how he got out of Mo Yuntian's imperial palace. Mu Tianlan was in a daze. He looked up at the sky with his eyes closed. He only felt that his heart was dead. Wuya, although I have tried my best to mediate, it is of no use. At present, I can only try my best to protect some of your families. As for protecting all of them, I am powerless. Moreover, even this small part may not be able to protect all of them. Mu Tianlan felt a sharp pain in his heart. Suddenly, a piece of coldness fell on his face. Then, there was a piece of coldness that penetrated his bones. In the distance, there was a child's voice cheering, "It's snowing. It's snowing." Mu Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes and only saw countless white snowflakes falling from the sky. This year's snow seems to come earlier than in previous years. Mu Tianlan stood bleakly in the snow and murmured. No one knew what he meant. Outside the palace, the military generals who were waiting for him came up and asked with concern, "General Mu, how is the situation? General Mu, what did His Majesty say? General Mu, how is old Meng? Is His Majesty willing to give him a way out?" Mu Tianlan looked up at the sky and sighed. He didn't say a word and walked in the flying snow with an inexplicable bleak expression. The generals behind him looked at each other, and their faces sank instantly. They were full of disappointment. One of them even cried out. Although no one could see any result from Mu Tianlan's face, there was no expression on his face and he didn't say anything. But this already showed that Meng Wuya's name as a traitor had been confirmed, and there was no turning back. The Dream Slayer army was finished. Asking for the author's vote of the year. Chapter 22:11. I'm going to His Majesty. I'm going to ask His Majesty for an explanation. There's always a place for justice in this world. How can you dismiss an army so carelessly? This won't do. A bearded general shouted in grief and indignation. He suddenly turned around and ran toward the main gate of the palace. Come back. Mu Tianlan shouted. Then, he stretched out his hand and pulled the running general to his side. Mu Tianlan raised his hand and slapped the general's face. Do you want another traitor to appear among us? Or will there be another corpse with the title of traitor? Mu Tianlan's face was livid. When the generals heard this, they felt as if they had been struck by lightning. Marshal Mu's words implied that the current situation might be 1,000 times worse than the worst situation that they had imagined. Mu Shui. Why? Why? One of the generals, who was the closest to Meng Wuya, asked tearfully. The rain is late. Marshal Mu gritted his teeth. His face was livid. He said each word in a low voice with a hateful tone. Then, he took large strides forward. His bleak figure was completely submerged in this sudden blizzard. This year's snowstorm had indeed come earlier than in previous years. What a heavy snowfall. The weather was cold enough. All the generals looked at Marshal Mu's back and felt a chill in their hearts. Outside Marshal Mu's camp, there were also many officers standing quietly in the snow, waiting. There were more of them, as many as thousands. These people were the officers of Meng Wuya's Dream Slayer army. All the generals above the rank of deputy general were here. They looked at Mu Tianlan and the others coming from afar. The muscles on Mu Tianlan's face twitched fiercely. He didn't say anything. He just looked deeply at the thousands of soldiers in front of him. He was speechless. He was too ashamed to face them. Facing these people's hopeful eyes, the people behind him all felt like their hearts were being cut by a knife. Without exception, they all lowered their heads. None of the thousands of people said a single word. They just looked at Mu Shuai, hoping to get the answer they wanted to hear. However, they were all speechless. After a while, the flames of hope in the eyes of those officers were extinguished bit by bit, without the slightest bit of light. Mu Tianlan straightened his back and stood in front of the thousands of soldiers. He raised his face and closed his eyes. He didn't say a word. After a long time, he suddenly bowed deeply to the thousands of soldiers. He bowed to the ground. Brothers, I'm sorry. A long time after Mu Tianlan finished speaking, he was still standing there with his body bowed. All the generals behind him bowed to the ground. They didn't have the face to say any words of explanation. They could only use this action to show their helplessness. The thousands of people on the other side stood there in a daze. Every one of them was like a wooden statue. After a long time, everyone quietly moved their feet and opened up the path to the camp. Still, no one spoke. As the first person turned sideways and opened up the path behind him, everyone behind him quietly moved their feet and stood sideways. A straight path appeared in front of Mu Tianlan's bowed body. As these people moved slowly and silently, drops of hot tears quietly fell to the ground. They burned a hole in the thin layer of snowflakes that had just fallen, revealing the ground under the snowflakes. Then, thousands of people returned to silence and motionlessness. Their eyes were full of silence. Mu Tianlan still bowed and didn't make the slightest movement. The generals behind him also didn't move at all. Suddenly, an order came from the opposite side: salute, kneel, farewell, Marshal Mu, kowtow, stand up. With the 5 majestic orders, thousands of people silently raised their hands, clenched their fists on the left side of their chests, and bowed to Mu Tianlan for the last time. Kneel down, thank, and bid farewell to Marshal Mu. Dong. Following an orderly dull thud, the entire earth trembled. The foreheads of thousands of hot-blooded men hit the snow hard at the same time, causing the snowflakes to swirl in the air. With the order of stand up, everyone stood up neatly. However, it was no longer silent. The next moment, the person at the front of the line quietly moved his feet and slowly walked out without looking back. Thousands of people all followed behind him and walked out silently. In the silvery white snowflakes, the black military uniforms of the Dream Slayer army were like a black torrent. Take care. Mu Tianlan straightened up. Everyone trembled with this sound, but no one stopped or looked back. Everyone, try your best to protect your families. Mu Tianlan said softly, if you can't, send them to me. Thousands of men trembled again at the same time, but still, no one stopped, no one looked back, and no one made a sound. Not even a cough or a gasp. Thousands of people left quietly as if they had never been here. Only neat footprints were left on the ground. It was so dazzling in this place of first snow. As it grew larger, those footprints were also slowly covered. However, these soldiers who had sacrificed their lives for Mo Yuntian, would they also be annihilated by history? Mu Tianlan looked at the footprints that were gradually disappearing on the ground in a trance. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and laughed bitterly. Then, with a sound of "wah," A big mouthful of blood spurted out without warning. It turned into a bloody mist and filled the sky. The people behind him surrounded him in panic. Mu Tianlan staggered and waved his hand. He said tiredly, "I'm fine." But he felt a chill in his heart. Even if you want to reshuffle the military, even if the military's power is severely tilted, even if you are too cruel. You are too cruel. Mu Tianlan looked sadly in the direction of the imperial palace and sighed. In Mo Yuntian, the situation suddenly changed overnight. The troops and horses under Yu Kai's command took over all the important places inside and outside the imperial palace. The surrounding cities also responded one after another. Almost every city's gate was occupied and guarded by Yu Kai's army. The army belonging to Commander Mu was ordered to guard the camp at the same time, and no one was allowed to go out. If anyone went out without permission, he would be punished as a traitor. Clan execution. Such an order was obviously biased. Everyone, especially the officials, quickly sensed that something unusual was going on. For a time, the people in Mo Yuntian's imperial city were in a panic. Everyone knew that the battle between the two highest commanders of the military ended with Deputy Commander Yu Kai's complete victory and Mu Tianlan's complete defeat. This ending made everyone's jaws drop. Although the military was divided into factions, Mu Tianlan had always had complete control over the military forces. His troops and horses were almost all elites. In terms of numbers, if there were only 10 people in Mo Yuntian's military, then at least 7 people were on Mu Tianlan's side, and there were only 3 people on Yu Kai's side. How could Mu Tianlan be defeated with such a disparity in strength? But the fact made everyone puzzled. The one who was defeated and completely at a disadvantage was exactly Mu Tianlan, who everyone thought was invincible. The forces belonging to Yu Kai's side were all arrogant and in high spirits, galloping their horses and looking insufferably arrogant. On the other hand, the soldiers of Marshal Mu's army had gathered at the edge of the campsite, their eyes spitting fire as they watched their old rivals flaunt their prowess at close range. They just lay on the edge of the camp. Behind them, the officers shouted loudly to let everyone go back to their tents. But these soldiers, who had strict management and military discipline, turned a deaf ear to this order. Behind them, the people in the military law office moved out one after another, waving their whips and whipping the backs of these iron-blooded men. Blood and flesh flew. Every time the whip went down, the people who were whipped twitched violently. But even so, no one went back to their own camp. They were still lying on the fence, watching what was happening outside. Everyone's teeth were deeply biting into their lips. Blood was cold. In the end, the people in the law office hit themselves until tears streamed down their faces. They threw away the whips and simply squatted on the ground and cried. The people in the imperial city still didn't know what was going on, but they were also keenly aware of the unusual atmosphere. They closed their doors one by one, only peeking out from the cracks of the door occasionally. Everyone's heart was beating wildly, as if they were welcoming the end of the world. Such panic quickly spread from the imperial city to the outside, and several surrounding cities were quickly affected. Then, it was like a stone stirring up 1,000 waves. The whole Moyun sky was in chaos because of it. In the afternoon of this day, since lunch, countless soldiers and horses began to gather and mobilize. Yu Kai began to take the next step. Countless doors were kicked open by the rude and unreasonable soldiers. Immediately after, strings of people were dragged out from inside. The people who were tied up had miserable expressions and their faces were filled with despair. If they walked a little slower, they would be whipped. Their cotton-padded clothes would be whipped and the cotton wool would fly, and blood would slowly ooze out. One push, one stagger. Among these prisoners, there were some who were covered in wounds because they resisted with force but were subdued. There were also some who were only young children, some who were already white-haired and had one foot in the grave. There were also some who were young girls, and there were also some women. It could be seen that each of these people used to have a certain status, or lived like a prince all year round. But at this moment, they were all tied up and dragged to the prison. Chapter 22:12. Officers wearing the uniform of the Dream Slayer army kept jumping out to block their way. What kind of crime did I commit? What crime did my family commit? I fought a bloody battle in the Blackwind Gorge. I died in the Heaven Eye Mountain. I killed 300 enemies in the soul-locking river. I made contributions to the heavenly court. I shed blood for His Majesty. I made contributions and worked hard. I am not guilty. Let go of my family. Let go of my family. The Blackwind Gorge, the Heaven Eye Mountain, and the soul-locking river were the three most praiseworthy battles in Meng Wuya's life. Back then, when Mo Yuntian's forces rebelled, Meng Wuya led the army to battle. The three great battles established his invincible reputation in the military. He and the army he led forced all the opposing forces to a dead end. The name Dreamslayer Army was formed from then on. The Dreamslayer Army destroyed the dreams of all the rebels. However, these officers were unable to save their loved ones after their screams. Instead, they were treated even more cruelly. Whenever one of them questioned them, countless soldiers would swarm out and capture them. They would kick them to the ground and tie them up. Before they could tie them up, their faces were slapped so hard that it was unbearable to look at. There were also countless rods that hit him where the pain was the most intense. These iron-blooded soldiers, who had achieved great military exploits in the past, were dragged into the prison. Their arms or legs had long been smashed, and they were no longer in human form. These loyal and courageous soldiers only claimed that they were wronged, but none of them tried to resist with force. On the second day, the search and capture continued. The entire heavenly court of Mo Yun and the 30 big cities outside the imperial city were all carrying out the same thing. Meng Wuya had been through hundreds of battles and made countless contributions. The Dreamslayer army he led also rose in status. They moved their families from the remote areas to the most prosperous cities. This was an honor specially granted by the Heavenly Emperor of Mo Yun. It was an honor that everyone in the military was envious of. However, the situation had changed. This honor had become a death sentence with nowhere to run. The target was clear. As more and more people were arrested, the military was in a state of panic. Especially when they saw that some deputy generals, and even the vanguard of the main force were all killed and sent to prison. The officers on Mu Qianlan's side finally began to stir. He could only watch helplessly as his brother's family was captured and abused. He didn't even have the chance to try and save them. This kind of helplessness was definitely not something a normal person could endure. After the incident, Mu Qianlan had already knelt in front of the Moyunshan Imperial Palace for 2 days and 2 nights, begging Yuan Tianjie to take back his order. Kneeling with him were almost all of Mo Yuntian's military pillars and upper echelons. Some officials even knelt down, hoping that their actions would give the Dreamslayer army a chance to survive. However, Yuan Tianjie didn't pay attention to these people's advice. At this moment, Yuan Tianjie and his beloved concubine were mourning their lost love in the mourning hall of the Tai Yuan Different Road. This concubine is Yuan Shitu's birth mother. He completely turned a deaf ear to the tsunami of pleading voices outside. What is His Majesty doing? A white-bearded old official asked angrily. So many people are crying and begging. Can't His Majesty hear it? He's completely indifferent. The others were stunned. No one knew why. The chief steward of the imperial palace had known Mu Qianlan for a long time and had some friendship. Seeing this situation, he felt really uncomfortable. He quietly came to General Mu and transmitted his voice. General Mu, you don't have to kneel anymore. Even if you kneel, it's useless. His Majesty is now summoning the soul of His Highness. He's now in the morning hall and won't care about anything that happens here. As soon as this sentence came out, Mu Qianlan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. With the support of his profound cultivation, even though he had been kneeling for 2 days, his knees were still flexible. However, this sudden sentence made his knees stiffen instantly, and he could barely move. For Yuan Shitu's accidental death, Yuan Tianjie hated Chu Yang the most. But now, other than Chu Yang, Yuan Tianjie hated Meng Wuya the most. At this moment, everyone was pleading for Meng Wuya outside, but Yuan Tianjie was summoning the soul of Yuan Shitu. Facing his beloved memorial tablet, Yuan Tianjie only became angrier. If it were any other time, there might be a chance to be lenient. But now, the more people pleaded for mercy, the more the Dream Slayer army would be pushed one step closer to death. It would only cause the opposite effect. And it wouldn't be of any use at all. Who came up with this bad idea for His Majesty? Summoning the soul? Summoning what soul? The Tai Yuan Shitu was killed by Chu Yang. His soul was scattered and his body and spirit were destroyed. What soul can he summon? Mu Tianlan's eyes were like a hawk's. Yuan Shitu died and there was a mourning hall. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor said, if Chu Yang doesn't die, the mourning hall won't be removed. He must use Chu Yang's head to pay tribute to his love that died in vain. It's Marshal Yu's suggestion. The Minister of Imperial Household was an old eunuch with a white face. He whispered, Marshal Yu said that the Tai Yuan Shitu's soul might not be completely destroyed. If His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor can use his supreme martial arts to perform the Heaven Ten Earth's soul-searching attack in the Great Mourning Hall, he might be able to summon the remnant soul of the Tai Yuan Shitu and return. And as long as there's a little remnant soul, it can be protected by the light of the Heavenly Emperor and enter the cycle of reincarnation. There'll still be a day when you reunite with your father. Mu Tianlan smashed his fist hard on the ground. This punch clearly didn't use any cultivation, but it still made a big hole in the solid ground that was as hard as star steel. Ridiculous. Mu Tianlan scolded angrily. The Heaven Ten Earth's soul-searching technique did have such a mysterious technique. What Marshal Yu said did indeed exist. But the premise was that Yuan Shitu's death must be near. And the current situation was that Yuan Shitu died in the Eastern Royal Heaven. For Yuan Tianji, it was already too far away to do anything. It was impossible for him to turn the tide. What's more, the Tai Yuan Shitu had already been dead for more than half a year. Only now did he think of summoning the soul? Although it was still possible in theory, there was no chance at all in practice. Moreover, after confirming that Yuan Shitu's soul had been destroyed, Yuan Tianji had already tried to summon his soul once. That time, it was completely useless. In other words, Yuan Shitu's soul had truly been destroyed, and not even a bit of his soul was left. No matter how much he tried to summon his soul, it would only be a futile effort and completely useless. Is His Majesty really muddle-headed? Mu Tianlan's chest heaved up and down. His beard moved without wind. He was so anxious that he couldn't say anything. His Majesty's action is still out of love. Even though he knows it's impossible, he still has to try. Just in case. The Minister of Imperial Household sighed deeply. Mu Tianlan suddenly came to a realization. Marshal Yu didn't mention this matter at this time simply to summon the soul of the Tai Yuan Shitu. Instead, it completely blocked the path of pleading for mercy for the Dream Slayer army. As long as Yuan Shitu was in the mourning hall, Yuan Tianji's hatred would be infinitely magnified. He would even lose his rationality and the ability to make decisions. In this way, any words of pleading for Meng Wuya would sound like the tragic death of love in Yuan Tianji's ears. Every word of such pleading would stimulate the pain of loss in Yuan Tianji's heart. Every pleading would push the situation of Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer army one step closer to an even more unbearable place. This thought was simply vicious to the extreme. However, Marshal Yu had grasped the thoughts of a parent. Although Yuan Tianji also knew that this method wouldn't work and that it would be in vain, he would still try his best to give it a try for peace of mind. What if there really was a chance? Mu Tianlan told everyone about this situation. Everyone looked up to the sky and sighed. Everyone stood up one after another. At this moment, the originally well-intentioned pleading had turned into adding insult to injury. However, if they didn't plead for mercy, would they just watch these loyal soldiers die unjustly in prison? Everyone looked at each other. They were all at their wits' end. Mu Tianlan took a few steps back and looked at a certain direction in the palace with a somewhat desolate expression. Over there was a faint smell of cigarette smoke. Ordinary people would not be able to detect it at such a distance, but Mu Tianlan could accurately sense it. There was the place where His Majesty the Celestial Emperor was summoning souls. The aura there was completely peaceful. There was no sign of fluctuation at all. Obviously, His Majesty's thoughts didn't move at all. He simply didn't care about how many officials of the country were kneeling and crying blood and pleading. Mu Tianlan looked at it deeply for a while. Finally, he straightened up and turned to leave. The heavy snow was still drifting in the air. Mu Tianlan's departing figure seemed to be carrying the heavy snow all over the sky. He didn't look back. He walked forward with unusual firmness. His footsteps became faster and faster. From beginning to end, he didn't say a word. As the others watched Marshal Mu leave, their faces were filled with grief and grief. What? Meng Wuya's family can't be found? Also, the families of those trusted generals who had been with him had all gone missing? There's no harvest at all? Yu Kai looked furiously at the face of the soldier who came to report the news. His face was unusually ferocious. He almost wanted to swallow the person in one bite. We really can't find them. The general said carefully in a low voice, it is said that, they all moved away a month and a half ago. They all moved away a month and a half ago. Yu Kai narrowed his eyes and then said, I see. You continue to search for the other core soldiers of the Dream Slayer army and their families, especially Meng Wuya's trusted aides. As for those who have been confirmed to have left, I will deal with them personally. Yes. The officer saluted and walked out. Yu Kai's calm face slowly turned gloomy, and there was a hint of danger. The next moment, he clapped his hands and said in a deep voice, Men. Chapter 22:13. Your subordinates are here. A few shadowy figures suddenly appeared. In the next period of time, pay close attention to all the movements in Marshal Mu's mansion. Also, don't let go of any trace of the confidants in Marshal Mu's mansion. Once there is any news, report it to me immediately. Yes, sir. Can I take this opportunity to kill Mu Tianlan? Yu Kai stood in front of the window with his hands behind his back. After thinking for a long time, he still shook his head. In any case, His Majesty will never allow the military to be dominant. That's why he supported me to fight against Marshal Mu. This time, although Mu Tianlan was hurt, and even hurt his foundation, it's impossible to really uproot him. Even His Majesty won't allow him to fall, at least not immediately. And I believe that as long as His Majesty's grief is over, he will definitely take care of Mu Tianlan's personal feelings. To a certain extent, he will allow Mu Tianlan to take revenge on me, so as to create a new balance. Different thoughts were rolling in Yuqi's heart, but this time, I've completely fallen out with Mu Tianlan. Since our positions are obvious, why don't we take advantage of this great opportunity to take a step further? Even if I can't kill Mu Tianlan, I will make him more uncomfortable. Even if I want to establish a new balance, I must be strong and he must be weak. Meng Wuya and the Dream Slayer army alone are not enough. Yu Kai, who had made up his mind, ordered again. After giving 3 orders in a row, he sat on the chair tiredly. He had just recovered from a serious injury, and his body was still very weak. It was impossible to fully recover in 1 or 2 years. Although the secret medicine given by Yuan Tianjie was magical, it was not as effective as the heavy pill. However, the 3 new orders given by Yu Lai were like the 3 sharpest knives, each of which would stab into Mu Tianlan's heart. Ask the people in the prison to hurry up and torture them. Don't ask them to give a confession, but torture their bodies to the maximum extent. The only taboo is to not kill them, but still try to do it. If they are released one day, they can only lie in bed for the rest of their lives. As for the torture of the women, I don't care if you're dead or alive. If anyone dies, behead them in public. The 3 orders were each more vicious than the last, leaving no room for negotiation. He had tortured a soldier who he knew was loyal to him into a cripple. His methods were vicious, and his heart was even more vicious. Using punishment on a woman's family was a taboo in the world, let alone a soldier's family. They were truly unscrupulous. Even if they were on opposing sides, their methods were still too much. Beheading the deceased in public is equivalent to announcing it to the world. The crime of treason would be nailed to death, and there would be no room for negotiation. Yu Ling knew that if he did this, there was a high chance that it would cause public anger. especially the backlash from the military. However, late rain wasn't worried at all, because he was waiting for the other party to rebound. The greater the rebound, the heavier the crime. When the rebound reached a certain point, Mu Tianlan would be completely unable to recover from this incident. In the future, even if there would be a situation where the two of them would fight against each other in the military, Mu Tianlan would no longer be his opponent. At least in terms of power and influence, it would plummet. But if there was no rebound, you, Mu Tianlan, couldn't even protect your own subordinates and even your subordinates' families. If you just watched your subordinates being framed and your family being humiliated, what qualifications do you, Mu Tianlan, have to stand in the position of the military's #1 marshal? No matter what the result was, whether there would be a rebound or not, Mu Tianlan's decline could already be predicted. Under late rain's push, under the tacit consent of Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, Yuan Tianji, since Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun ascended the throne, the Mo Yun Heavenly Court's first great unjust prison unfolded just like that. The targets of the unjust prison were all loyal soldiers who had once risked their lives for Mo Yun Tian. These soldiers were bathed in blood all year round. When they went out to war, each one of them had outstanding military achievements. Perhaps when they galloped on the battlefield and bathed in blood to kill the enemy, no one would have thought that their final ending was actually in the heavenly court that they risked their lives to protect. They died in the hands of those aristocrats who had sacrificed countless times to ensure their safety. The far-reaching consequences of this unjust prison made people dumbfounded. In the later world, it was called the unjust prison that changed the entire heavenly imperial court. Even Yuan Tianji himself didn't expect what this unjust prison would lead to. Another day's time passed. The Mo Yun heavenly imperial city was still covered in snow. There was snow and blood. And the sound of crying out for injustice was becoming more and more intense and widespread. And the military's late rain's methods were getting tougher and more unscrupulous. There were too many soldiers riding their horses on the road at full speed. Behind the horse, there was a bloody body being dragged by a long rope. No matter how the body screamed and begged for mercy, the rider still laughed loudly. He did not stop and continued to gallop away, leaving behind a trail of blood. A trail of blood accompanied by a trail of snow. In front of the entrance of the marshal's mansion, Mu Tianlan, who looked even more haggard, had his hands behind his back. His face was cold as he quietly watched his subordinates being taken away one by one. His subordinates' families were screaming. Those who were caught were dragged across the street in front of him, one batch after another. Mu Tianlan's figure remained steady and motionless, as if he was indifferent. Only the coldness in his eyes was getting stronger and stronger, more and more awe-inspiring. Many people didn't need to pass by this road at all. But under late rain's deliberate order, even if they had to deliberately take a detour, they must pass by Mu Tianlan's door. Provoking. An undisguised provocation. Yes, I just want to see how long you, Mu Tianlan, can endure it. Endure it. When you can't endure it anymore, you don't have to endure it anymore. Endure it to the end. No need to endure it anymore. Then wait for His Majesty's thunderous anger. Endure it to the end. Then you can definitely wait until people's hearts are scattered. Because Mu Tianlan understood this truth, he was in a dilemma. The joints of his hands behind his back had already turned white. Although his face looked calm, his whole body was already as tense as a bow with a full bowstring. Was it on the verge of breaking out, or, finally, Mu Tianlan turned around expressionlessly and returned to the mansion. His figure was nowhere to be seen. Behind him, there was still a cruel scolding from afar. Fuck you. Hurry up. Can't you walk because you broke a leg? Crawl. Crawl. If you can't crawl, I'll chop you to death with my sword. Save me the trouble. A loud scolding would be accompanied by the sound of a whip being whipped, followed by a shrill and miserable shriek. The cycle repeated itself endlessly. Mu Tianlan walked in as if he didn't hear it. In the courtyard, hundreds of military generals had already gathered here. When they saw Mu Tianlan coming in, they surrounded him with a whoosh. Marshal Mu. What should we do? Marshal Mu, give the order. We'll fight with them. Marshal Mu, we can't delay any longer. If we delay any longer, those people will really be finished. Marshal Mu. I beg you. Mu Tianlan's hawk-like eyes turned from the faces of his subordinates one by one. A trace of unconcealable pain flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone, go back. Why are you all here? What do you want to do by gathering here?" Could it be that he was planning to rebel? Get out of here. Get out of here immediately, right now. Marshal Mu. Nearly 100 people couldn't believe what they heard. They knelt down neatly and screamed shrilly. This is His Majesty's decision. I have to follow it. How can we break the laws of the heavenly court? Mu Tianlan's face was cold. The Dream Slayer army is not guilty. When the time comes, they will naturally be cleared. If they are guilty, no one can save them. Go back and wait for the next news. Everyone stared at Mu Tianlan with their eyes wide open. Their eyes were full of disbelief, surprise, and strangeness. Was this what Marshal Mu said? How could he say that? How could he say that? As long as these people were in the heavenly prison now, even if they were lucky enough to get out in the future, they would basically be useless, especially those women. How could they still be innocent after being in the heavenly court? Under the leadership of Yu Hyun, how could these old opponents of his have the slightest bit of luck? Suddenly, there was a high-pitched scream from outside. It dragged on and the voice was hoarse, revealing unspeakable pain. That's Tiger's voice. Several generals recognized the voice. It was the voice of Li Laohu, the deputy general of the Dream Slayer army. His voice was very unique. It was because he was once captured on the battlefield. He was tortured by the enemy. In the end, half of his tongue was cut off. Although he was rescued later, he could never speak clearly again. How could such a tough man cry out in pain? What kind of pain did he suffer before? I want to go and see. Many people suddenly stood up. Even if there was something wrong with the Dream Slayer army, they shouldn't treat a tough man who had sacrificed so much for Mo Yuntian like this. All of you, stop right there. No one is allowed to go. This is an order. Mu Tianlan shouted, his eyes shining. Everyone, get the hell out of here. Without my order, anyone who dares to take a step out is disobeying the military order. It's rebellion. It's rebellion. Mu Tianlan's face was livid. He kept scolding, get out. Get out. All of you, get back home. When everyone heard this, it was as if 3 days of cold water had been poured over their heads. In the army, the official saying was that the superiors were the most important and it was the duty of the soldiers to obey orders. But what was really important was that the soldiers were united. There was never a military officer who didn't protect his own soldiers. How could he fight a war if he couldn't even protect his own soldiers? Marshal Mu had always been the one who protected his own soldiers the most. Mu Tianlan had done so much for the sake of the soldiers. Therefore, everyone was convinced. No one disobeyed Mu Tianlan's orders. Chapter 22:14. Mu Shuai, are we not going to care about the life and death of these brothers? Don't tell me we don't care about the families of these brothers. Are we just going to stand by and watch them be framed and humiliated? Marshal Mu, are you really going to do this? Everyone did not leave immediately. They all looked at Marshal Mu in a daze. Their eyes were full of confusion and hatred. Was Marshal Mu really frightened by Yu Kai's series of methods? Was he going to admit defeat this time? Was he really going to give in this time? I never repeat what I say twice. Don't make me repeat myself. Mu Tianlan's face was livid. Guards, use the big stick and chase all these people out of here. Whoever dares to go out and disobey the military order will be punished for treason. His whole family will be executed and his whole family will be implicated. Marshal Mu. Everyone exclaimed in disbelief. But they were all pushed out by the guards of the marshal's mansion. With a bang, the door was closed tightly, completely isolating the space on both sides. A group of generals stood in front of the door. They were all cold and looked at each other. Everyone's faces were full of grievances and despair. If Marshal Mu really stood by and ignored this matter, the Dream Slayer army would basically be announcing the end of a dead end. Sigh. Deep sighs could be heard. Mu Tianlan drove all his subordinates out of the door and stood in the courtyard for a while. Then, he slowly walked into his study with heavy steps. "How is it?" Mu Tianlan asked quietly in his study. He seemed to be talking to himself. However, in the seemingly empty room, someone immediately replied. Yu Kai has ordered all the arrested officers of the Dream Slayer army to confess. Everyone will be tortured until they are disabled, regardless of whether their family members are dead or alive. If they are humiliated, the dead will be beheaded in public. As long as there is a rumor, as long as it involves the officers of other armies, they will be immediately arrested and brought to justice. No matter who is involved. The descendants of these officers are basically unmarried. Their families are inextricably linked. Under the order to exterminate their families, even their in-laws have been arrested. The extent of the involvement is shocking. So far, the number of officers of the Dream Slayer army who have been arrested and imprisoned in the heavenly prison has exceeded 7,000. Including their families, there are almost 100,000 people. This number is still rising. The prison cells are gradually overcrowded. Some of the people who are considered to be too suspicious by Yu Kai's faction and have high backgrounds have been detained in private prisons. However, the search is still going on, and there is a trend of it gradually expanding. Currently, it is only limited to the Imperial City. The criminals in the surrounding areas are facing the same situation. Overall, this time, at least 1 million people have suffered because of this. This number is even the most conservative estimate. In addition, the disbanded 500,000 soldiers of the Dream Slayer army have been disbanded. They have been disarmed and returned to their fields. However, although everyone who returned home was not detained, they were humiliated in various ways. It seems that as long as it is a person, no matter how heinous and evil he is, as long as he is in front of the Dream Slayer army, he is superior. He can be humiliated in any way, in any way. This kind of unscrupulous persecution is getting more and more intense. Currently, it has spread to 41 cities around the Imperial City, and it is still spreading and expanding. If we really don't care, when this matter comes to an end, I am afraid that at least 30 million people will suffer because of this. The voice in the void spoke faintly, recounting such a tragic event, but there was no emotion in the voice at all. Mu Tianlan took a deep breath and said, "How is the Heavenly Armament Pavilion now? Where are they active? Are they active frequently? Since yesterday, our men have been provoking them." However, the host of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, Xie Danqiong, is getting more and more cunning. He refuses to go deep, and the number of masters under him has increased. His strength is also more powerful, so it is difficult to lead him here, the voice in the dark said. You go there immediately and tell him in person that the military has decided to cooperate with him this time. Let him take his men 500 miles away from the Imperial City and move around. Then, we will give him a big gift, Mu Tianlan said slowly, with a trace of pain in his eyes. I am afraid that Xie Danqiong won't believe this. He is not only cautious, but also a phoenix that never lands in a place without treasures. The person in the dark hesitated. Don't worry about this. What you need to do is to determine the approximate location, and then send me a message with your divine soul. I will use the divine soul doppelganger to go there and negotiate with Xie Danqiong personally. Mu Tianlan took a deep breath. This matter must be kept secret. Yes. In a dense forest. Xie Danqiong was dressed in black, and his handsome face was full of doubts. He stood quietly on the treetop, standing still. On the path in the forest, a large group of escorts was walking. The cries of the group were earth-shattering. Along the way, the closer they got to the Imperial City, the more such things happened. Xie Danqiong couldn't help but be surprised. This situation was really strange. This was because there were many handsome men among the prisoners. They were majestic and strong. With Xie Danqiong's eyesight, he could easily tell that these men were all experts. Even if they weren't at the level of being able to fight alone, they were still quite outstanding. But why did so many masters commit crimes at the same time? And many of them were even physically disabled. Such people could be regarded as a big fortune in any world. Why did they end up like this? I am afraid that this matter is very strange. Give the order to focus on the investigation, Xie Danqiong said. There was really nothing to focus on in this matter. He believed that as long as he caught someone and asked, he would know the whole story. It was nothing more than a competition between the military forces. These people in front of him were the ones who lost. Dream Slayer Army? It is the Dream Slayer Army? Because they failed to eliminate Chu Yang? The remaining people were all subdued by Chu Yang? They betrayed Mo Yuntian? The Dream Slayer Army that stayed behind in Mo Yuntian was convicted because of this. One person was convicted, and the whole clan was implicated. Xie Danqiong's elegant eyebrows tightly wrinkled when he realized what had happened. This matter was a little interesting. Then what should he do? Also, during this period of time, some people on Mo Yuntian's side deliberately lured him to the direction of the imperial city. They clearly had no evil intentions, but their attitude was really ambiguous. What was this situation? Did this deliberate lure have anything to do with this matter? Xie Danqiong knew his own situation. Although he had narrowly escaped death several times, and had many fortuitous encounters, his cultivation had improved greatly. Now, he had reached an extremely high level. But there was still a considerable distance to the level of a saint. It was difficult to reach it in one go. Even if he could advance to the level of a saint, so what? He was definitely not a match for the few big shots in Mo Yuntian's military, not to mention that he was not a saint yet. If they really wanted to completely annihilate him, he was afraid that the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, which seemed to be flourishing for a while, would be destroyed within a day and a night. In the end, he would be the only one who would be able to rely on Big Brother's heavy Dan to barely escape. But why was there such a strange situation now? Xie Danqiong felt that this should not be a bad thing. At least, it was worth taking a risk and trying. Now that he had suddenly received such exciting news, Xie Danqiong felt a little more confident. It turned out that this matter was directly related to his boss Chu Yang. But, they should not know my relationship with Chu Yang, but, my Heavenly Armament Pavilion is now the biggest bandit group in Mo Yuntian. Since that is the case, they came to find me. Xie Danqiong stood on the treetop, deep in thought, calculating the next step. Chief, that person wants to see you. Please make a decision. Someone transmitted a message. Xie Danqiong's subordinates had given this mysterious expert a special name. They didn't know where this person had come from, and they didn't know his specific identity. However, this person had lured and coerced Xie Danqiong's Heavenly Armament Pavilion all the way to its current position. He had gradually led Xie Danqiong's Heavenly Armament Pavilion to its current position. Xie Danqiong did not understand this person at all. But, he knew one thing. This person's cultivation was far higher than his. If he really had any unfavorable thoughts, his people would have already suffered heavy casualties. If they were deliberately tracked by this person, his chances of escaping would be very slim. Okay, I will go and take a look. Xie Danqiong felt the viburnum flowers on his body and took a deep breath. Heavenly prison. The entire prison was filled with this kind of smell and was filled with this kind of sound. The gloomy environment, the sinister smile of the officials, the miserable cries, all the other prisoners in the prison kept quiet out of fear. Even some of the heinous criminals who had killed countless people were trembling all over, their bodies shaking like a sieve. Even those heinous criminals had never been treated so cruelly, right? What kind of crime did these people commit in the end? Why did they receive such treatment? As more and more prisoners entered the heavenly prison, it was almost full in just a short day. Yu Lai gave the order. The prisoners who were originally imprisoned in the heavenly prison, if they had committed serious crimes, they would be executed collectively. As for those who had committed relatively minor crimes and had served more than 3 years, each of them would be given 100 whips and released from the heavenly prison. This decision made countless prisoners feel as if they had been pardoned and were secretly delighted. but who knew that the 100 whips would not be easy to endure. Basically, after 100 whips, only 10 out of 100 people would die. Those who were lucky enough to survive would have injuries all over their body. For a time, the heavenly prison was flooded with blood and the bones of the dead were piled up like a mountain. That very night, in the past few days, the head of the website has come to my place, so I have to postpone the outbreak. But after I send the guests away, I will immediately work hard. Of course, there will be a guaranteed update no matter what. Everyone, don't worry. Chapter 22:15. It was night, in a heavily guarded palace in the Moyun Heavenly Palace. Ink Cloud Heavenly Emperor Yuan Tianjie was already preparing to go to bed at this moment. In front of him was a stunning beauty. This person was Yuan Tianjie's first wife, the current Ink Cloud Heavenly Court's official Heavenly Empress. That beauty frowned, opened her red lips, and said in a gentle voice, "Your Majesty, although I shouldn't meddle in state affairs, I'm afraid that handling this matter like this is really a bit too much. Marshal Mu has been loyal and devoted for hundreds of thousands of years, and he has worked hard for many years. Why do you have to make things like this? He is your old official, why hurt the heart of a loyal official?" On Yuan Tianjie's thin face, his eyes flashed inexplicably, and he said softly, "It's fine. The Empress was a bit anxious, Your Majesty, please reconsider this matter. Mu Tianlan is loyal to me. I naturally know this, and I have never doubted it. It's just that Mu Tianlan has already sat on this throne for a whole 130,000 years. Yuan Tianjie said softly, as if he was explaining to the beauty, but also as if he was saying it to himself. Then he said, "Zitong, don't worry, I definitely won't let Mu Tianlan fall completely, but his power have really reached the point where it needs to be reduced." The Empress sighed, "Your Majesty, in these years, from what I know, Marshal Mu's power has already been reduced hundreds of times. But at those times, there has never been such overwhelming resentment. This time is really very different from the previous times. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Of course it's different, so the effect of the previous times was not so obvious. The sum of the previous hundreds of reductions may not be able to compare to this one time." Yuan Tianjie said lightly. His tone was extremely calm, but the meaning of his words was thought-provoking. However, at this point, there was already nothing more to say about this topic. But Yuan Tianjie still said, "I believe that Mu Tianlan will understand." This sentence, which seemed like an explanation and comfort, was still meant for that beauty, or perhaps for Yuan Tianjie himself. The Empress sighed softly and did not continue this topic. Perhaps in the past, Mu Tianlan would have understood. But this time, you attacked Mu Tianlan's most beloved and most valued troop. At the same time, they were also Mu Tianlan's real right-hand men. This time, you have completely shaken Mu Tianlan's foundation and damaged him. Would he really understand? Yuan Tianjie was clearly also considering this issue. He said, looking at the history books, the people who were able to sit on the highest seat often didn't have the intention to sit on the throne. Those who were able to ascend the gate of heaven, if they weren't outstanding talents, then it was because of the situation. Apart from a few peerless geniuses, most of them were pushed up by their most loyal subordinates. Yuan Tianjie said softly. So there are times when it is necessary to reduce the thrust. The Empress faintly said, "Even if you know that this person is loyal and has no ulterior motives, you still have to do this. This is the sorrow of being a monarch in the first place. It's a fate that keeps repeating itself." Yuan Tianjie closed his eyes, and his expression returned to being emotionless. "It can't be helped." The Heavenly Empress no longer spoke. "It's late. Go to sleep." The lights went out. The entire imperial city fell into a state of extreme silence. The sky won't fall. It was true that the sky wouldn't fall. But what would Mu Tianlan's final reaction be? What practical actions would he take? Would he understand or not? Would he accept it? Yu Ningyan ordered his subordinates to seize the time to interrogate and torture the criminals. So, they worked almost non-stop at night. Moreover, Yu Ningyan's subordinate, Wang Banyu, specially selected some people who had conflicts with the Dream Slayer army, especially the low-level officers and even soldiers, to interrogate the higher-level officers of the Dream Slayer army. Originally, the officials of the Ministry of Justice in the prison were only there to assist. They didn't have any decision-making power at all. This kind of comfortable feeling of being weak and bullying the strong, and the other party couldn't resist at all, made these people very satisfied. Originally, these officers of the Dream Slayer army were existences that they couldn't even look up to. But now, at this moment, they were being humiliated and abused by their own subordinates. Thinking back to their majestic appearance in the past, comparing the two, their cruel mentality was even more perverted and satisfying. They used all kinds of methods that should be used and shouldn't be used. But the officers of the Dream Slayer army were suffocated to death and humiliated to death. The sounds of yelling and shouting in the prison were extremely fierce. All kinds of screams rose and fell, and it was like hell on earth. It was late at night. However, the torture and interrogation in the jail still continued. The screams never stopped, and they were incessant. It was already the third watch. The prison was still brightly lit, and the oil lamps flickered. But in the dark atmosphere of the prison, it was still so gloomy and scary, and there were ghosts everywhere. Inside the prison, there was a sentry every 3 steps, and a sentry every 5 steps. Adding on the garrison, the Ministry of Justice was really impregnable and unbreakable. Outside the prison, there were many military camps. Weapons flashed, and there were patrols. Every time, there would be 2 patrols passing by. There were countless sentries in the open and in the dark. Furthermore, in order to prepare for the worst, Yu Lai had deployed a large number of soldiers to guard the prison. There were 20,000 soldiers in the prison, and 200,000 soldiers outside. They were spread out in all directions, surrounding the prison from the outside like an iron bucket. With such tight security, it was obvious that even a mouse would not be able to enter and leave freely. If you wanted to enter, you could. As long as you used your life in exchange, this was called the price. In the snowy night, the snow continued to fall. In the marshal's mansion, Mu Tianlan looked dazedly at the snow outside the window. He murmured, "Awakening dream." Behind him, a dark shadow appeared for a moment, and someone said in a sinister voice, "Everything has been arranged." Mu Tianlan said, "How is it on Marshal Yu's side?" The shadow said, "Yuaji went to the rain-admiring pavilion tonight to discuss with military advisor Wang Banyu, to formulate this and this and this and this strategy. Afterwards, she issued an order to change the guard outside the prison. Yuaji appointed the commander of this wave to be. Yuaji then went to the study room. Wang Banyu followed her in, and the 2 of them drank wine inside. The wine they drank was pine cloud wine. There were side dishes on the table, they were called. Then Wang Banyu left. Prince Yu sat in the study for a while and then went back to sleep. He first went to Third Aunt's room, but came out 15 minutes later. He stood in the snow, and then went to the garden to relieve himself. Then he went to Third Aunt's room. After passing through 2 corridors, Prince Yu went in and did not come out. According to the situation of Marshal Yu's residence, half a month ago, there was nothing unusual in Third Concubine's room. There shouldn't be any secret passages or doors. Therefore, Marshal Yu has been sleeping in Third Concubine's room until now. There was the sound of a man and a woman making love in the room. The person who made the sound of a man panting was confirmed to be Prince Yu himself. If Yu Jian heard these words, she would first be surprised, then ashamed, but then she would only feel her hair stand on end. His every move, what he said, what he did, what he said, what he did, what he said, what he did, what he did, what he did, what he did, what he ate, what he drank, the details of his life, etc., were all strictly recorded by Mu Tianla. Even the details of relieving himself, making love with a woman, etc., were all recorded. It was sent to the ears of his greatest enemy. Prince Yu urinated. He did not go to the toilet, and did not let anyone serve him. He just sat under a tree. Mu Tianlan frowned and said, "It seems that he is in a hurry." The shadow person smiled and said, "Yes, he is in a hurry. Prince Yu should be asleep now." Mu Tianlan smiled slightly. Yes, he is very tired. Especially after that incident, he is recovering from serious injuries. He does not know how to control himself. The shadow person gave an understanding smile. It seems that Prince, you will have a good dream tonight. If he is tired, he naturally needs a good rest. Mu Tianlan said lightly. Yes, the key is whether Marshal Mu is willing to let him have this good dream until it is finished. The shadow person grinned. It is easiest to wake up from a good dream. The reason is clear. Mu Tianlan did not turn around and said in a low voice, "Tonight is the time to wake up from the dream. It is the time to distinguish between the clear and the turbid." Yes. The person in the shadow answered respectfully. Mu Tianlan stood still for a long time. When the snow on the ground outside the window had reached 3 inches, he said softly, "Go." Yes. The shadow suddenly flashed and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Mu Tianlan paced a few steps in the study and sat down in the armchair. The lines on his face moved, and a cold smile appeared. Dream awakening. You cut my dream, so I will awaken your dream. It is time for 500,000 soldiers to wake up from their dream, and you, Prince Yu, should wake up from your dream. Although the night was deep, the torture in the prison was still in full swing. Outside the prison, in the hazy snow that was still falling, 7 or 8 white shadows began to flicker gradually. The number of flashing white shadows was increasing, and they sneaked directly toward the military camp in the south. They were like snowflakes rolled up by the wind. These white shadows moved extremely fast. Often in a flash, they had already crossed a distance of 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. At the outermost periphery were the guards of the military camp and the patrol team. A white shadow floated over in the snow as if it was invisible. With a stretch of his hand, he brought out more than a dozen residual shadows. At the same time, the 2 patrol teams that took over were covered by his mouth and nose at the same time, and then they fell to the ground silently. Every person who could serve as a guard here was not an ordinary warrior. However, under the hands of these people, they had been put to the ground one after another without even making a sound. After falling down, he was carefully helped to a dark corner and leaned against the wall. They were like sleepers who neglected their duties. Chapter 22:16. The men in white were extremely careful when they made their moves. Other than not hurting them, they could also make them fall into a deep sleep for a long time. Even when they woke up again, they might not be able to confirm whether they had fallen asleep or had been knocked unconscious. Immediately, these white-robed men let out a very strange gu sound. In the dark night, it was still very low, like the sound of underground rats. However, as this voice rang out, countless white shadows rushed over. For a moment, there were countless of them, and it was hard to count. The next moment, these people stopped at the side of the barracks. There was a garrison stationed there. Their only task was to prevent criminals from escaping. A white-robed man let out a whistle. At this time, an officer walked out of the barracks. He looked around and said, "Did you find anything strange?" The sentry replied, "Sir, for the time being, we did not find anything strange." The officer nodded. "Thank you for your hard work. During this period of time, everyone must keep their eyes open. The remnants of the rebels are very powerful. We must not be careless. If something happens, we will all be in trouble." "Yes. All right, it's time to change shifts. It's only the beginning of winter and it's already so cold. Fuck, it's only because our team is raised by stepmothers. Fuck, it's like freezing popsicles here. Let's go back and take a rest. Thank you for your concern." Along with the voice of gratitude, a total of 32 sentries stood up. Then, the 30 people behind the officer began the handover procedures and took over these people's original tasks. The sound of footsteps sounded. 2 teams ran over. Facing the vast expanse of snow, they shouted a few times and then began to patrol. The officer smiled strangely and said, "The handover must be smooth. There must be no mistakes. Understand?" Then he nodded and went back. When he reached the corner, he unexpectedly took out a sharp dagger from his bosom without any warning. He roughly gestured, and then stabbed the dagger into his own chest, where it was a vital point. That officer's body slowly slumped to a corner as if he had fainted. It was only natural for him to be seriously injured and unconscious at this moment. A man in white appeared in front of him in a flash and carefully examined his injuries. After confirming that there was no danger to his life, he let out a long sigh of relief. With a wave of his hand, countless white shadows swarmed forward and passed through the checkpoint. All the guards who had just changed shifts were standing straight like wooden pillars. Thousands of people flew past them at high speed, but they didn't seem to notice it at all. The newly changed patrol team brushed past the white-clothed people. Both sides seemed to be facing air. Then, the white-clothed people continued to advance, and the patrol team continued to patrol in a strict manner. Just like that, they passed through 3 camps in a row without making a sound. All the sentry posts, all the spies, all the patrols, and all the guards of the 3rd Corps had been replaced. Countless people in white finally entered the supposedly impenetrable Moyun Heaven prison. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. The defense system that Yuji thought was flawless for thousands of years was so vulnerable after Mu Tianlan really took action. Mu Tianlan had devoted hundreds of thousands of years of operation to almost control the military and the government with both hands. How deep were his tentacles? Even Yuan Tianji absolutely couldn't figure it out. Just when Yuji had just risen, Mu Tianlan had placed countless people around Yuji. After so many years, how many of Mu Tianlan's people were around Yuji? It was really hundreds of thousands of years of hard work. The horror of this foundation was absolutely indescribable and unimaginable. Once it was launched with full strength, it was like a thunderbolt, and the opponent had no possibility of resisting. At this time, the white-clothed people had entered the prison. Up to now, all the people on the periphery of the prison had been replaced. It had completely fallen into the hands of the white-clothed people. Moyun Heaven's prison had temporarily lost contact with the outside world. From the moment they entered the imperial prison, the group of white-robed men changed from their previous cautiousness and began a massacre. They silently slaughtered the guards of the imperial prison, slaying them with every blade and slaying them with every blade. It seemed that they had an irreconcilable hatred for these people. Wherever the cold light flashed, everyone was killed the moment they saw the light of the blade and the shadow of the sword. Each of these white-clothed people used a thin sword blade. When the sword stabbed directly into the heart, the sword chi exploded in the heart immediately. The internal organs were all turned into powder in an instant. The sword chi rushed up, and even the brain was turned into a pot of messy porridge in an instant. The next moment, when the narrow sword body was pulled out of the chest with a whoosh, there was no wound at all on the outside, but the sword person was already a complete corpse. These white-clothed people were all the most cold-blooded, cold-faced killing gods. Along the way, they harvested people's lives, and there was no expression on their faces. But behind them, not a single person was left alive. There was no sign of life at all. Some of the more important interrogation rooms were handled by the officers under Yuji's command. The door was opened suddenly without a sound, and then the white figures suddenly rushed in. Without even a greeting, they killed mercilessly. A moment ago, they were still unscrupulous and arrogant, but the next moment, they were beheaded, and their souls were gone. In less than a cup of tea's time, the smell of blood in the prison became thicker. Those officers of the Dream Slayer army, who had been tortured beyond recognition, were carefully carried by the white-clothed people on their backs, and then rolled forward. This one-sided massacre went on silently for more than an hour. Finally, a strange scream was heard from the prison. However, the screams in the heavenly prison rose and fell one after another. No one would notice this scream at all. The group of white-clothed people had already slaughtered countless people and entered the heavenly prison's belly. Everyone was calm, unhurried, and unhurried. With a sword, a cold light flashed, and a life was cut off. They pulled out their swords and left. With a cold face, they rushed to the next place, and continued to wave their swords, kill, and save people. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Everyone seemed to be an expert in the field of executioners. They were very familiar with killing people, and they were very familiar with it. Thousands of people, and they were all top killers. Just like that, they killed their way through. Although the prison occupied a large area, they finally reached the end of the prison. Countless white-clothed people began to check around to make sure that no one had escaped. Regardless of whether they were dead or not, every body was at least stabbed with a sword. Then, in a soft cry of surprise, the families of the officers of the Dream Slayer army were carried by the white-clothed people, and they quickly evacuated all the way. However, there were too many people to carry. Although the number of people in white was not small, their strength was still insufficient. Even though each person carried 2 people at a time, they still had to go back and forth 3 times before they managed to save everyone. In such a dangerous situation, the white-robed leader actually walked around the prison once more with his hands behind his back, checking and confirming once more. It was as if the examiner had just finished an exam, and all the students had handed in their papers and left, and the examiner had leisurely walked around. His calm and unhurried footsteps actually gave off a subtle and pleasant feeling as he walked through the bloody prison. After walking around, the white-clothed man showed a satisfied smile and said softly, "It's time to wake up from the dream." "Who should wake up from the dream?" Then, the white-clothed man waved his sleeve, dipped it in the blood on the ground, and wrote on the wall, "How dare you harm my subordinates? This is the result." Signed, Mu Tianlan was here. His body suddenly floated up, and he flew out of the prison like lightning. The heavenly prison, which could hold 100,000 prisoners, returned to silence. Only the sound of blood flowing out from the wounds of the corpses could be heard. It was full of blood. Outside the prison, Yu Meng's subordinates, who were standing guard, and the patrol team had changed into white clothes at this moment. They followed the white-clothed men and flew away. After walking for some distance, the group of people entered an inconspicuous courtyard. Tens of thousands of people walked in with their wounded on their backs. However, this inconspicuous courtyard was able to support so many people, as if it had an endless capacity. In the end, everyone disappeared from this small house, and there was not even a bit of noise. After a long while, an old man walked out of the small house, looked around, and suddenly took a deep, deep breath. Then, his 2 hands slowly clapped on the ground. The instant his hand touched the ground, the snow on the ground of half of the imperial capital suddenly melted without a sound. White mist immediately rose from the ground. All traces of the white-clothed person's footsteps completely disappeared without a trace with the evaporation this time. At the same time, there were people in the north, south, east, and west of the imperial capital who clapped their hands on the ground. Therefore, in the entire imperial capital, a super big city that could hold tens of millions of people, there was no trace of snow except for the imperial city area. It was as if the heavy snow in early winter that had been falling for 2 days and 2 nights had never existed. However, the snowflakes in the sky were still falling slowly. The old man slowly lifted his hands from the ground, coughed, and murmured, "What a heavy snow." The heavy snow continued to fall, and continued to dye the ground into a silver-white color. Chapter 22:17. On this night, the same thing happened in the 35 cities around Mo Yun Heavenly Emperor's capital. All the prisoners in the prison had disappeared without a trace. Without exception, all the guards in the prison died an unnatural death. Every prison was originally heavily guarded. However, the most bizarre and inconceivable thing was that every officer who was in charge of guarding the prison that night had strangely suffered fatal injuries, while all the guards had gone missing. No one knew if they were alive, or if they were dead. Their corpses were nowhere to be found. In all the prisons, as long as it was related to the Dream Slayer army, regardless of gender, old or young, all of them seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Even the other prisoners in some of the prison cells had all disappeared. 35 cities and more than 50 official prison cells had been turned into a land of death, because there were only corpses inside. A total of more than 200,000 people had all died in this incident. There were only about 30,000 of them, and they were the original prison guards and officers of the Ministry of Justice. As for the rest, more than 75% of the total, about 150,000 people, they were all Yu Kai's hardcore subordinates. The incident was far from over. Mo Yun Tian's vice commander Yu Kai's concubine's family was executed at the same time. Not a single chicken or dog was spared. Yu Kai lost an old father-in-law and countless mothers-in-law in one night. And Yu Kai's #1 military advisor Wang Banyu, because after returning home, he remembered something and went to the military camp. So he escaped the disaster. But his whole family had all died at home. The mansions of several generals under Yu Kai's command had also suffered a tragic attack. There were countless casualties. When this case came out, the world was shaken again. Mo Yun Heavenly Emperor Yuan Tianjie was originally still asleep, but he was awakened by the shock. It was not time for the morning court yet, but all the military officials of Mo Yun Tian had already gathered in front of the main hall. In one night, 200,000 people had died. More than 500,000 criminals had quietly escaped. This kind of thing, no matter the time, was a super big case. Even in the Mo Yun Heavenly Court, this was the first time such a big thing had happened in 1,000,000 years. When Yuan Tianjie learned of this matter, he smashed the dragon table in front of him into pieces on the spot. And those walls with words written on them had been completely moved and placed in the main hall. Mu Tianlan's name was impressively on it. Irrefutable evidence. Your Majesty, you have to seek justice for me. Yu Lai was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. His snot and tears were streaming down his face. He was truly heartbroken this time. The people who had been mobilized for this incident were all his most trusted subordinates. They were also all the people who had always been against Mu Tianlan and Marshal Mu's subordinates. Although there weren't too many high-level officers that died, the most loyal subordinates were all turned into corpses. This kind of loss was truly disastrous. Yu Lai asked himself if he could bear it. It was truly too disastrous. It must be Mu Tianlan who broke into the prison this time. Only Mu Tianlan had such great courage and ability to do this. Mu Tianlan had no respect for His Majesty. He pretended to obey, but secretly opposed. He killed the innocent and killed the loyal officials. His crime was unforgivable. Your Majesty, please investigate. Tears streamed down Yu Lai's cheeks as she knelt on the ground. Her eyes were filled with sadness. There was no need for Yu Yang to explain. The military officials all knew that this was a revenge. This was a revenge against Yu Yang. The reason was very simple. Yu Yang had planned and executed the plan to frame the Dream Slayer army. If it was just to slander Meng Wuya alone, perhaps this matter would have been over. But the problem now was that Yu Yang's appetite was too big this time. She had succeeded in framing Meng Wuya. She had even added insult to injury by killing the meritorious officials and implicating the innocent. She had created the greatest injustice since ancient times. This bloody case involved a wide range of people. It was unimaginable and appalling. The ultimate target was Marshal Mu. That was what led to this most decisive and bloody revenge. And such a big move had mobilized tens of thousands of saints and above, thousands of celestial beings, and even the super strong people at the saint level. Such a luxurious lineup, such a super big move, and to be able to do it so secretly, there were only two people in the entire black cloud sky who could do it. One was Marshal Prime Minister Yi Luoyu, Marshal Mu Tianlan. Apart from these two people, even the Heavenly Emperor of Black Cloud Sky, Yuan Tianjie himself, might not be able to do it. Because if the Heavenly Emperor made a move, it would definitely be a grand and righteous move. He would definitely not act in private like this. Now, the person Yu Yang had offended was Mu Tianlan. As for who started this revenge, was there still a need to ask? It went without saying that he knew what was going on. Although the truth was known, and everyone was very clear in their hearts, at this moment, everyone's reaction was absolutely not like this. Before Yuan Tianjie could speak, many of the military officials had already submitted a memorial. Your Majesty, This matter definitely has nothing to do with Marshal Mu. In order to avoid suspicion, Marshal Mu has been at home these few days and closed the door. Moreover, he issued an order to his subordinates that whoever dares to take a step out of the house without permission is equivalent to plotting a rebellion, and their entire family will be executed. How could this be done by Marshal Mu? May Your Majesty investigate clearly and not wrongly accuse the good Marshal Mu. He has worked hard and made great contributions, and he has been loyal and devoted for hundreds of thousands of years. Don't disappoint this old official's heart. Yes, Your Majesty. To do such a big thing, even if they were all experts, at least 100,000 people would be needed. If we calculate the manpower needed to take the prisoners away, I'm afraid that even without 300,000 people, it might not be possible to accomplish this. But this night, all of the military camps under Marshal Mu's command were peaceful. There was absolutely no movement at all. This official can guarantee with my head that this matter is unmistakable. It definitely has nothing to do with Marshal Mu. Yes, Your Majesty. If it was really done by Marshal Mu, how could he be so stupid as to leave his name behind? It's still not too late to deliberately cover it up. This method of framing someone else is really too inferior. Yes, Your Majesty. This matter is definitely suspicious. Your Majesty, perhaps this matter is simply Yu Yang's way of deliberately framing Marshal Mu. It's nothing more than using some lives to achieve his own unspeakable ambitions. His intentions are condemnable. The official who said this was clearly already crooked, and crooked to the ends of the earth. When Yuan Tianjie heard this sentence, he didn't hide his crooked mouth at all. A real bastard. Using some lives? That was 200,000 lives, okay? Or using the lives of 200,000 loyal subordinates to frame Mu Tianlan? Although Yu Yang's ability was much worse than Mu Tianlan's, he definitely wouldn't be so brainless, but this couldn't be said clearly, because at the moment, only Yuan Tianjie firmly believed that it wasn't done by Yu Yang. As far as the Yu Yang that everyone knew, in order to achieve his goal, he might be able to do this. If he could really take advantage of this to bring down Marshal Mu, Yu Yang would definitely think that these people's deaths were worth it. Someone, summon Mu Tianlan to the palace immediately. Yuan Tianjie was furious. This matter was obviously done by Mu Tianlan. Even if others had the intention, they didn't have the ability to do so. Mu Tianlan came very quickly, because since this matter happened, he had already come outside the palace after getting the news. Although in order to avoid arousing suspicion, he had been waiting outside the palace for an audience. But with his cultivation, there was no reason that he couldn't hear Yuan Tianjie's roar. Your Majesty, I'm here. I know that I'm guilty. Please punish me. Mu Tianlan's expression was sorrowful. Oh, what are you guilty of? I didn't even know. Yuan Tianjie asked gloomily. Your Majesty is kind and benevolent. You're strict with yourself and lenient with others. But I neglected my duties, so that such a major case happened in the capital. I can't absolve myself from the blame. Please punish me severely, Your Majesty. Mu Tianlan replied sorrowfully. Mu Tianlan, you're really vicious. Yu Yang cried out in tears, my father-in-law's family is just ordinary people. Why do you have to be so cruel? If you're dissatisfied with me, just come at me. What about the soldiers under my command? Why do you have to be so cruel? When this sentence came out, 10% of the officials in the palace curled their lips. Everyone was more clear about some things that Yu Yang did. Your father-in-law was innocent. Then, the 500,000 soldiers of the Dream Slayer army and their millions of family members were innocent. Wasn't it you who made up the unwarranted case? You're dissatisfied with Mu Tianlan. You're an enemy. But what's wrong with the 500,000 soldiers? Didn't they still end up in a state of mourning because of you, and have nowhere to complain about their grievances? Now that such a thing happened to you, you actually say that you're innocent. The word innocent, how dare you say it out loud? Mu Tianlan smiled faintly and turned around. He looked at Yu Yang contemptuously. It seems that Marshal Yu is sure that I did this big case. Yu Yang shouted angrily, if it's not you, Who else could it be? Who else could it be? Mu Tianlan said faintly, Heavenly Imperial Court has always been a place that pays attention to the rule of law. Especially in our Moyun sky, it's even more strict. Since Marshal Yu is so sure that I did it, then Marshal Yu must have solid evidence. Please take it out and let me have a look. Let me be convinced and have nothing to say. Yu Yang was dumbfounded. Mu Tianlan was never speechless, but at this moment, he really had nothing to say. Solid evidence. What solid evidence was there? He didn't even need to show forged evidence. His crime was like a myth. Yu Yang actually still didn't understand how Mu Tianlan's subordinates did everything yesterday. He couldn't figure it out. Where could he find evidence? Marshal Yu, why are you hesitating? Please take out the evidence. If there is solid evidence to prove that I did it, then Mu Tianlan will not resist and will be willing to accept the punishment. But if Marshal Yu can't take out the evidence and just keep talking, then don't blame me for accusing you of slandering me, Mu Tianlan said righteously. Chapter 22:18. In the next moment, Mu Tianlan seemed to notice the walls that had been dug out. He paused and then said, the so-called evidence that Marshal Yu believes in is not these walls, right? If Marshal Yu believes that these walls can prove that I did it, then I have nothing to say. But as far as I know, these walls should be taken from different places. No matter which direction you start from, you should be tens of thousands of miles away from each other after going in a circle. First of all, even though I don't want to belittle myself, I can't go to so many places at the same time in one night. I'm always alone. Second of all, the time of this case is about the same. I really can't be in two places at the same time. Third of all, this is not my handwriting at all. I have had some correspondence with Marshal Yu. I believe that Marshal Yu can recognize that this is not my handwriting. Last of all, Mu Tianlan's face was cold. Marshal Yu, if I really did it, then do you think you still have the chance to stand in front of me and testify against me? Marshal Yu's face was full of resentment, but he really had nothing to say. Yes, this so-called evidence could not convict Mu Tianlan at all. Instead, it could only be reduced to a laughingstock. Everyone knew that Mu Tianlan must have done this, but there was no evidence to prove it. Yes, what Marshal Mu said is reasonable. Although Marshal Mu is honorable, and I also believe that Marshal Mu dares to admit what he has done, this is indeed not Marshal Mu's handwriting. An official jumped out and said, Your Majesty, please investigate clearly and do not wrongly accuse an innocent person. Yes, I just checked again. All the soldiers under Marshal Mu's command did not move last night. No one went out. Yes, so Marshal Mu really has nothing to do with this. I dare to guarantee with my life that Marshal Mu is definitely not this kind of person. He would never do such a thing. Yes, Marshal Mu has always been noble. Yes, Your Majesty, Marshal Mu has always been loyal. Yes, Your Majesty, Marshal Mu has always been hardworking. It's true, Your Majesty. General Mu has always been honest, kind, and honest. In an instant, pleading voices filled the entire hall. It was as noisy as a market. All of you, shut up. Yuan Tianjie roared. Normally, Yuan Tianjie wouldn't have lost his composure like this, but right now, he was truly angered to the point of stupefaction. It doesn't matter how you guys plead for leniency. This decision is in my hands. What noble character and unquestionable integrity, loyal and devoted, hardworking, and meritorious service. That's fine, but to actually fucking honest, dutiful, kind, and honest also came out. Were these words related to Mu Tianlan? What part of him was honest and dutiful? Which part of him was being kind and honest? Over the past hundreds of thousands of years, at least 3 billion people had died under Mu Tianlan's orders, if not 5 billion. This fellow was simply the #1 executioner of Mo Yuntian, and he actually had the kindness and sincerity of his mother. This mouth had no teeth at all. At this moment, another heavenly court guard captain rushed in, covered in blood. Your Majesty, how is it? Yuan Tianjie asked. I was ordered to go to the heavenly prison to investigate. Inside, it was a tragic sight. However, I accidentally found some strange signs in the heavenly prison. This guard captain was a majestic and burly man. When he stood up straight, he was a full 2.5 meters tall, and his face was full of curly beard. He didn't seem to be scheming. But only those who were familiar with him knew that if you really thought so, then you were gravely mistaken. The meticulousness of this guard captain's thoughts was definitely the most shocking kind. This guard captain's surname was Zhao, and his name was very rustic. He was called Zhao Dazhuang. But after becoming famous and holding an official position, he felt that his original name was really too rustic. So, Yuan Tianjie personally gave him the name Zhao Zhong. What strange signs? Yu Lai asked impatiently. Zhao Zhong didn't even look at Yu Lai. He just turned around and said, "Bring the things up." Yes. A response came from outside. Then, 7 or 8 burly men quickly walked into the main hall. Each of them held a tray with both hands. They walked up respectfully, handed the tray to the palace maids, and retreated. The first tray contains some weapon fragments. It's the powder from the weapons that were damaged when the bandits fought with our people. Zhao Zhong pointed to the first tray. These fragments show that there's a large amount of star silver mixed in these weapons. He raised his head. And this kind of material, star silver, as early as 150,000 years ago, because it would cause a strong reflection when mixed into weapons, it's not good for concealing one's whereabouts. It has long been removed from the equipment of Mo Yuntian's standard army. In other words, the people who committed the crime this time are very likely not regular soldiers. This is one of the reasons. The second tray contains some cut-off clothes and cloth scraps. From the material of these clothes, it can be seen that these people's clothes are all wearing the Snow Army's leather robes on the outside. The color is white. Their purpose is obviously to use the snowy environment to pass off as genuine goods. But the clothes they wear on the inside are not. They belong to the military, but some more complicated materials. There's blood silk, tall cotton, and cape cotton. This is half a shoe sole, obviously cut off by a knife. It's a whole spiritual beast's tendon. It's a fire bull. The fire bull's tendon is hard and not suitable to be used as a shoe sole. Our military has never used it. This is the second reason. The third reason, the fourth reason, the eighth reason is that this is the most peculiar. Zhao Zhong picked up a corner of a strange weapon and showed it to everyone. Although they were in the main hall, they could feel that this strange metal was shining with some colorful light. This is a petal, Zhao Zhong said, and, in the prison, there are some traces of this petal-shaped weapon on some of the walls. Although the bandits have carefully scraped off a layer of the wall and annihilated the traces, there are still some hidden places that haven't been cleaned up. I believe that they left in a hurry when they left, so they didn't check too carefully. This broken half of a petal is deeply embedded in the wall. As far as I know, in the whole Heaven Imperial Court, there's only one person who can use this kind of petal as a weapon. Zhao Zhong said, this person is a major suspect, or we can basically conclude the case. This case is done by this person. In Moyun Sky, except for the military and the government, there's only one person who can do this, and it doesn't even take a lot of effort to do it. Zhao Zhong's expression was very serious at this moment. Under such careful investigation, the suspicion about Mu Tianlan was reduced little by little. Now, even those who were originally certain that Mu Tianlan was the murderer were greatly shaken. Who is this person? Yuan Tianjie narrowed his eyes and asked. Moyun Sky's biggest bandit leader now, the master of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, Xie Danqiong. Zhao Zhong's words were powerful and resonating. Suddenly, the crowd was boiling. Obviously, everyone knew this name. Xie Danqiong? It's actually him. Leading Heavenly Armament Pavilion alone, moving unhindered in Moyun Sky. Where the viburnum flowers fall, there are mountains of bones. Xie Danqiong. In the entire Moyun Sky, maybe only this Xie Danqiong has this kind of power. Only Xie Danqiong can use this kind of flower petal as a weapon, and he is invincible. Only Xie Danqiong has the motive to incite discord within the military. All the signs above indicate that the mastermind of this case is Xie Danqiong. He is the one who committed this shocking crime. Also, he wants to frame Marshal Mu and try to cause Moyun Sky's military to have no peace. If something happens to the military because of this, it will be hard for them to target them. Just relying on the army of the local government is not a threat to Xie Danqiong. While Heavenly Armament Pavilion has only been established for a short period of time, it has become something now, and cannot be ignored. Zhao Zhong finally came to a conclusion. This subject thinks that in this case, Marshal Mu is innocent, and Marshal Yu is an innocent victim. The true culprit, the instigator, the one who wants to incite discord within the Black Cloud Sky military is the master of Heavenly Weapon Pavilion, the leader of the bandits, the user of viburnum flowers, Xie Danqiong. Yuan Tianji's face was dark, and he did not speak. The officials below all had different opinions. So it was Xie Danqiong who did it. This Heavenly Armament Pavilion has only been established for a short period of time, but their reputation is great. No wonder. Yes, the methods of this gang are crazy, but I hadn't thought that they would be so crazy and unrestrained. I really didn't think that Heavenly Armament Pavilion had developed to such a level. I remember when I mentioned Heavenly Armament Pavilion a while ago, it was just a small and unremarkable power. Yes, it's really too fast. However, this Xie Danqiong is quite good at taking advantage of opportunities. Didn't he choose the right timing this time? I'm afraid that even we would have suspected that Marshal Mu was behind this if Imperial Bodyguard Zhao hadn't investigated thoroughly and found out the truth. This Xie Danqiong is really too despicable, he really is cunning, we should take the time to exterminate him. But I heard that this Xie Danqiong comes and goes like the wind, he never leaves a trace, how can we exterminate him? Prime Minister Yi Luoyu stood there calmly. Hearing these discussions, she unconsciously rolled her eyes and then returned to her original state. She did not say a word, and did not express any opinion. The perpetrator was Xie Danqiong? That was a joke. And it was that kind of broken joke that was not funny at all. Xie Danqiong himself and his Heavenly Armament Pavilion, even if they developed for another 10 years, they might not be able to do such a thing. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. Yuan Tianji ordered furiously. Your Majesty is mighty. The officials bowed together. When Yuan Tianji left the hall, he felt his liver hurt from anger. Chapter 22:19. At present, all the signs clearly pointed to Xie Danqiong. All the evidence showed that it was done by that inexplicable Xie Danqiong. However, how could Yuan Tianjie not know the truth? There was something fishy going on, but now, it was no longer appropriate to make this matter a big deal. It seems that the plan to weaken Mu Tianlan's strength this time was right. Although the expected goal has not been achieved at present, it is also because of this that Mu Tianlan's hidden strength has been revealed. He has become so strong that even this emperor has to be amazed. This matter was clearly done by him, yet he was able to completely point the arrow to someone else. He has no suspicion at all, and even the public opinion is on his side. Today, Mu Tianlan obviously did not use all his secret forces to deal with Yu Kai, but if all these forces are activated, plus those generals in the military, what kind of power will it be? Can this emperor deal with it? Yuan Tianjie's face was very ugly at this moment, extremely ugly. Give the order to pursue Heavenly Armament Pavilion with all our strength. As soon as Yu Kai returned home, he fiercely gave such an order. He also did not believe that this matter was really done by Heavenly Armament Pavilion. First, Heavenly Armament Pavilion did not have such strength, nor such powerful intelligence. Third, there were no insiders in the military. Fourth, there was no foundation. How could it be done by Heavenly Armament Pavilion? It was just a group of bandits. How could they have such great means? But now all the clues were on Heavenly Armament Pavilion. At the moment, only by catching Heavenly Armament Pavilion could they possibly catch Mu Tianlan's weakness. As for obtaining evidence of Mu Tianlan's crime from other aspects, Yu Kai had never thought of it. With Mu Tianlan's degree of cautiousness, he would never let anyone catch any evidence. He had always been watertight when it came to doing things. In addition, Yu Lai asked herself if she really needed a way to vent. In one night, heaven and earth had flipped. Just when she was in high spirits, she immediately gave up. This breath was really gloomy and hard to release. Regardless of whether Heavenly Armament Pavilion was the perpetrator or not, they were the best punching bag right now. His vitality was greatly damaged and was no longer enough to fight against Mu Tianlan. Pass down the order. Besiege the Heavenly Armament Pavilion with all our might. Mu Tianlan immediately issued this order after he returned. Yes. The voices of the generals gathered in the marshal's mansion almost broke through the marshal's hall. Now, everyone was full of energy and high spirits. No wonder Marshal Mu was able to keep his composure. It turned out that he had prepared such a marvelous backup plan. This is truly a big deal. Those 500,000 people had all disappeared in one night. "200,000 enemies had all been slaughtered in one night. It wasn't just the resentment of the past few days, it was the resentment that had accumulated over the years. Everything was spat out in one go. As soon as they left the tent, the generals began a heated discussion. I haven't been able to shut my mouth the entire day. I wasn't even this excited when I was looking for a wife to consummate my marriage. Damn, this is too satisfying. Serves you right. That's right, that's right. I just want to see what kind of face Yuchi has now. I heard that in just one night, this fellow lost a father-in-law and so many mothers-in-law. Wahahaha, why does that bastard have so many mothers-in-law? Isn't that simple? His fathers-in-law are all shameless. How many mothers-in-law are there? Hey, do you know? Yuchi's youngest father-in-law is only 43 years old this year. He. Yuchi is already several 100,000 years old this year. His youngest father-in-law is not even qualified to be his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great- time, Eugene used this opportunity to get rid of this little father-in-law. A person who isn't even qualified to be my grandson actually dares to be my father-in-law. Isn't that courting death? That's true. Indeed, it makes a lot of sense. This is simply a godly deduction. I reckon it's most likely correct. That's right, that's right. The other fathers-in-law may have been killed by that Xie Danqiong, but the youngest one is definitely not him. He must have taken advantage of the situation and touched his father-in-law. You're absolutely right. All the generals were in high spirits as they spoke, beaming with joy. One of them suddenly said, "But now we have to catch Heavenly Armament Pavilion and Xie Danqiong. What should we do? They have helped us a lot in this matter. Are we really going to catch them? Bah, are you stupid?" The others snorted together. You're still thinking about whether to catch Xie Danqiong or not. What are you thinking? You're so stupid. Damn it, Xie Danqiong's Heavenly Armament Pavilion has saved many of my brothers and their families. If I can really meet him, I can't wait to kowtow to him. Catch Yuchi's motherfucker. That's right. If Yuchi can really catch the people of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, I will make trouble. Can I still help the enemy to deal with the benefactor? How can I be ungrateful? Quiet. Cough, I'm just too excited. Even if I have the heart, I don't have the guts. This kind of thing can't be said. He. While they were talking, Mu Tianlan's angry voice came out. What nonsense are you all talking about? Get out of here and do your work. Every single one of you better watch your mouths. Is this something you should be saying? Not only should you not say it, but you shouldn't even think about it. Listening to this strict reprimand, the generals stuck out their tongues and dispersed in a hubbub of laughter. The resentment and incomprehension from before had long vanished into thin air. Many people were thinking, although Marshal Mu's words are strict, there is some meaning in them. Blame us for talking nonsense. That means we've said too much. Also, is this something you can talk about? You can't even say it out loud. Well, since it's not something you can talk about, then it must be something you can do? Marshal Mu's meaning was, it doesn't matter if you do it, but, you can't say it. That must be it. That must be it. Take this matter for example. You can do it, but you can't say it. Ahaha. Since one of them had such a realization, naturally, everyone else had the same realization as well. As a result, an encirclement and suppression operation of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was carried out in a grand manner within the entire dark cloud sky. Xie Danqiong was currently in an unusually hidden place, looking at the hundreds of thousands of people in front of him with a melancholy face. If his thoughts could be summed up into one sentence, it would be help. Damn it, Mu Tianlan said that he would give me a big gift, but I really didn't expect it to be such a big gift. This gift is indeed a big gift. But I can't eat it with my current small stomach. Not to mention that they are all wounded, not to mention that there are also family members. Where should I arrange for these people? Not to mention the Dream Slayer army soldiers from all over the place. Mu Tianlan, your fucking big gift is going to fill me to death. As the saying goes, you can't get fat by eating one mouthful. But now, Xie Danqiong didn't believe this at all. Because he had now become fat by eating one mouthful. And he had become a super fat one. Xie Danqiong was completely helpless about the current situation. During this period of time, even though he had a large number of supplies and a large amount of inventory, and he had also earned a lot of money, but his large number of supplies was only in comparison. Compared to the huge consumption of the current lineup, it was estimated that the number of people would exceed 5 million after gathering all of them. Then, my large number of supplies, even if it's just food and drinks, is enough for these people to use for 2 months. Not to mention, there are also a large number of wounded people who need medicine, and it seems that they need to use good medicine, otherwise, a large number of people will die. Big brother, where do I have so much medicine? Where do I have so many resources? Isn't this forcing people to die? Help! A figure suddenly flashed, and a man with a strong figure appeared beside Xie Danqiong with a bitter smile. Chief, this. What should we do now? Xie Danqiong held his forehead with his hand and groaned. What should I do? How do I know what to do? This damned Mu Tianlan. Then he said, there will always be a way when the time comes. Let's take one step at a time. Since these people have come to our place, we must take good care of them. Don't let anyone die of hunger or cold. Try to think of a way for those wounded people. Immediately send people to buy medicinal materials. Buy a large number of them. Take out all of our inventory. These people will be our brothers in the future. Yes, Chief. Pay attention to buying in batches. Go through some changes before returning to the secret base. Make sure that the people are well settled. Xie Danqiong sighed in melancholy at this point. His secret base could be said to be a secret in the past. There were few people there, and it didn't attract much attention. But now, what kind of secret was it? Millions of people were moving in. Just the smoke that rose from the chimneys every day was enough to reach the clouds. At this moment, there was a burst of dense air in front of them. Snow was fluttering in the air, and a white-clothed figure slowly appeared. A voice sighed with emotion. Pavilion Lord Xie is indeed a benevolent and righteous person. We didn't misjudge you. Xie Danqiong sternly said, please note that I'm only a temporary chief. I'm not the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's Pavilion Lord. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion's pavilion lord is someone else. He's my elder brother. There's a big difference between the two. Chapter 22:20. The man in white laughed. It's the same, it's the same. Xie Dan Qiong frowned and said, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. Forget it, it's hard to talk about it. Let's not talk about this topic for the time being. Let's get back to the main topic. What can you teach me this time? How can we cooperate in this situation? He pointed, in this situation, I'm afraid that we can't even withdraw from the Imperial City. If it's only the people of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, maybe it's fine. But how can we protect these people? The man in white said, this is your Heavenly Armament Pavilion's matter. How can we overstep our authority? Moreover, we absolutely believe that Chief Xie will have a way to deal with this matter. Xie Dan Qiong was silent for a moment. Then, he said, I've already brought the people out for you. My people didn't make a move from the beginning to the end. And they didn't suffer any injuries either. But I've still helped you a lot. You can take these people with you. My Heavenly Armament Pavilion will withdraw from here as soon as possible. I can't joke around with the lives of tens of thousands of my people. The man in white frowned when he heard this. Xie Dan Qiong's decisiveness surprised him a little. The man in white thought for a moment and said, Chief Xie, there are some things that I'll make clear to you. First, these people are Meng Wu Ya's Dream Slayer army and their families. Now, the Dream Slayer army has been abolished. After this matter, these people have become Mo Yuntian's traitors. So, they can't go back. And it's not realistic for our forces to protect them. After all, we're being watched by many parties. Once they're discovered, they'll be implicated and die. Although we're not afraid, these people will die sooner or later. So, these people can only follow you for the time being. The man in white frankly looked at Xie Dan Qiong. We will think of a way to break you up into pieces. Moreover, we will send all of you 30,000 miles away to the mountains and valleys. That is where the Heavenly Armament Pavilion started. I believe that Your Excellency will have room to maneuver once you get there. Xie Dan Qiong's face was calm, but he didn't open his mouth to speak. He didn't say yes or no. In addition, we have already sent people to uproot the foundations of the two great sects that once followed the emperor to vent his anger. Of course, we have kept all the resources of those two great sects. In other words, those two bases, as long as your Heavenly Armament Pavilion is there, they will all be yours. This is a small reward. Also, I've also brought some gifts for Chief Xie. The man shook his hands and took out a string of spatial rings. There were at least 40 to 50 of them. Within each of these spatial rings, there are 20 similar spatial rings. In other words, there were a total of 1,000 interspatial rings, and there were 1 billion purple dawn coins in them. There are all kinds of treasures of heaven and earth, as well as all the equipment that belonged to the Dream Slayer army. There are also many healing herbs. I believe it will be enough to treat the injuries here. For this matter, we raided the warehouses of more than 10 pharmacies overnight and packed everything inside. In addition, there is a considerable amount of military inventory, weapons, and so on. This is our last token of appreciation to our 500,000 brothers. The man in white sighed deeply. However, we can only guarantee that you will be safely transferred to the mountain ravine base. Once you are there, we will not interfere with each other's business from then on. Even if we meet again in the future, we will only be strangers. Please, Chief Xie. The man in white bowed slightly. Although we are suspected of helping the enemy, we can't abandon our 500,000 brothers. This is also the last thing we can do for them. I'm ashamed that this is all we can do. It's enough. Xie Dan Qiong's heart was a little shaken. He was even deeply moved. The friendship between iron-blooded soldiers was indeed soul-stirring. Whether these people were wronged or framed, or whatever, there was one fact in the end: from now on, they would be strangers. And for these brothers who would become enemies in the future, they committed a shocking crime, overturned the prison of the Heavenly Court, slaughtered 200,000 people, and even delivered all the things they needed. Xie Danqiong suddenly had a kind of admiration for Mu Tianlan. No matter what happened in the future, Mu Tianlan deserved to be called a real man for being able to do this. He was loyal to his friends. Xie Danqiong heaved a long sigh of relief and said, "Okay, let's do this. I promise you. Then you must arrange people as soon as possible and send us out as soon as possible. Now that we are here, we are in fear every moment. This is not a good feeling. This is not a problem at all." The man in white laughed. At this point, the collusion between the military and the bandits had officially come to an end. From this moment on, Xie Danqiong had changed into a big force with millions of subordinates. From this moment on, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion had officially become a force that could influence Mo Yuntian's general trend. The Dream Slayer army had always been loyal to Mo Yuntian, but in the end, they were framed and betrayed. Everyone was inexplicably sad and indignant. Therefore, Xie Danqiong almost didn't encourage them. Everyone agreed to follow. However, when they left, hundreds of thousands of heroes cried together. It was extremely shocking. When they left, their old friends were their enemies. When they left, they couldn't go back to their former homes. The glory of the past had become a thing of the past. From now on, they had to carry the name of bandits, roaming the mountains and forests. Who could understand this kind of helplessness and sadness? Mo Yuntian was in chaos. Not only the imperial capital, but all the territories of Mo Yuntian were in chaos. As far as the eye could see, there were fast horses galloping everywhere. Spirit beasts galloped with people on their backs. Just because of a small and unknown Heavenly Armament Pavilion not long ago, today's flames of war had filled the sky. Almost one-third of the army under General Mu Tianlan's command had been mobilized. Except for the troops stationed at the border, the rest were basically mobilized. In addition, General Yu Kai's army was also mobilized. It was the big movement of the Mo Yuntian military. Although they were all under the slogan of arrest, the former was actually assistance, while the latter was the real arrest. The two were diametrically opposite. Since the day the Dream Slayer army was removed, snow fell in the whole of Mo Yuntian, and it didn't stop for 10 days. But on this snowy day, Mo Yuntian's movements were frequent, like a raging fire. But in such a chaotic place, the original Dream Slayer army's officers and soldiers gathered from all over the country. They brought their own family members and threw themselves into a certain troop like a flood. Then, they rolled forward with the troop. No one knew where they were going. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion led by Xie Danqiong, for the first time, enjoyed the wonderful taste of collusion between officials and bandits. They openly changed into military uniforms and mingled with the Mo Yuntian army. They meandered all the way to the south without any obstruction. They didn't even encounter a check. Occasionally, there would be a check. The leading officer would come forward and slap them in the face. Then, they would rush out. No one dared to let out a fart. The injured even had carriages to sit in. They would recuperate along the way, occasionally chatting and joking. They would even gather in small groups to gamble and try their luck. If they drank a little wine, there would be nothing better in the world than this. Was this little day being encircled and suppressed? It was simply too joyful. The later this good life ended, the more ideal it was. Some members of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion were cheering in heaven. Motherfucker, if encircling and suppressing is like this, then they might as well encircle and suppress us every day. Come on, I'm not afraid. I'm looking forward to it 1,000 times. Xie Danqiong was full of melancholy. But at the same time, he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He only felt that today was the most bizarre day in his life. With the title of the #1 bandit of Mo Yuntian that came out of nowhere, he drank and chatted with the important military figures. And this process was when the Mo Yuntian officials claimed that they were going all out to encircle and suppress him. This was simply too miraculous. Also, he saw that his own troop was getting bigger and bigger. Almost everyone was full of resentment towards the Mo Yuntian heavenly court. Also, the military doctors were treating the wounded on his side along the way. As Xie Danqiong drank, he sighed, "This really is. I'm not Mo, I don't know how to swear, but I still have to say it today. This really is a fucking dream. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. I feel so fucking good. Along the way, Marshal Mu's army and Marshal Yu's army constantly encountered each other. Whenever the two armies met, the scene was always explosive. There were no exceptions. The enemy army has temporarily stopped their march. We are going to search. Search your mother. You dare to swear. So what if I scold you? Old still wants to beat you. Motherfucker, you dare to try? I don't believe it. Not just old, the brothers all dare. Come on, all of you, kill these sons of B** keys and make them believe. Awoo tilde everyone, fight back. They definitely are hiding traitors. Motherfucker, you motherfucking know how to slander people and quibble just like your Marshal Yu. Brothers, attack together. Kill these bastards. Kill you motherfucker. Kill you son of a bitch. Bastard son of a bitch. Watch my blade. Tilde who motherfucking dares to sneak attack. If you are a man, come out with old. The whole place was filled with foul air. Along the way, they had basically fought their way through like this. Everywhere they went, the mountains and forests would be destroyed beyond recognition. Then, both sides would report to their superiors, our army encountered the heavenly armament pavilion in a certain mountain and forest. We bravely killed the bandits and fought a chaotic battle. The battle was unprecedentedly tragic. How many people died? No one mentioned that the cause of the matter was internal strife. Of course, they didn't dare to mention it. So the Heavenly Armament Pavilion became the scapegoat again and again. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.